The story of organized crime in America is filled with larger-than-life figures, notorious for their violence, audacity, and flamboyance. Yet, among these infamous names, there were also those whose power lay not in the noise they made, but in the silence they maintained. One such figure was Tommy Gagliano, a man whose influence over the underworld was profound, yet rarely boasted. Known as the silent architect of the Lucchese crime family, Gagliano's life and methods exemplify the subtle art of control, patience, and strategic thinking that defined much of the mafia's golden age in mid-20th century America. Born in 1892 in Palermo, Sicily, Galliano immigrated to the United States during a time when the Italian immigrant population was seeking opportunities, often in the shadows of legality. Settling in New York City, he quickly became enmeshed in the tightly knit Italian-American communities of the Bronx and Lower Manhattan. These neighborhoods, bustling with immigrants seeking work and community, were also fertile ground for organized crime, offering protection, services, and control in exchange for loyalty. Gagliano, from his earliest years in America, demonstrated a keen intellect, remarkable discretion, and an innate understanding of human nature, qualities that would become hallmarks of his leadership. Unlike some of his contemporaries who sought notoriety through flashy displays of wealth or ruthless enforcement, Gagliano preferred to remain in the background. He understood that power was not about fear or fame alone, but about the ability to control outcomes without drawing attention. He built relationships carefully, aligning himself with influential figures in the burgeoning New York crime families, and learned to navigate the delicate balance between cooperation and competition. This quiet approach earned him respect and trust among both allies and rivals, a crucial asset in a world where missteps could be fatal. The Lucchese crime family, which would later become one of the 5 families dominating New York's mafia scene, benefited immensely from Gagliano's leadership. At a time when the mafia was consolidating power, grappling with internal conflicts, and seeking to expand its influence over unions, rackets, and legitimate businesses, Gagliano's approach was methodical and disciplined. He avoided unnecessary confrontations, instead focusing on steady growth and long-term stability. Unlike other bosses whose tenures were marked by violence and upheaval, Gagliano's reign was defined by quiet prosperity, strategic alliances, and meticulous organization. Gagliano's methods were subtle but highly effective. He established a strong network of loyal subordinates, each carefully chosen for their competence and discretion. He maintained a low public profile, rarely attracting law enforcement attention, and ensured that his family's operations were insulated from unnecessary risk. These qualities allowed the Lucchese family to thrive even during periods when other families faced violent rivalries or legal scrutiny. In many ways, Gagliano's leadership style reflected the principle of classical Sicilian mafia culture, emphasizing honor, loyalty, and strategic patience, but adapted to the complex social and economic reality of New York in the 1940s and 1950s. One of the defining moments in Gagliano's career was his ability to navigate the changing dynamics of organized crime during Prohibition and its aftermath. Although he was not as publicly visible as some of the bootlegging magnates, Gagliano's influence over key criminal enterprises ranging from labor racketeering to gambling was significant. By maintaining alliances with other influential bosses, he ensured that the Lucchese family could operate with minimal interference while maximizing profits. This delicate balance of cooperation and control exemplified his strategic brilliance, earning him the nickname the Silent Architect. Throughout his tenure, Gagliano also demonstrated an uncanny ability to manage internal disputes without resorting to violence. Whereas other crime families experienced frequent bloody power struggles, Lucchese family under Gagliano enjoyed a rare sense of cohesion and stability. His approach emphasized diplomacy, negotiation, and strategic patience, qualities that, while less glamorous than brute force, proved far more effective in ensuring the family's longevity. Gagliano's emphasis on discretion and loyalty created an environment where operations could continue smoothly, undisturbed by the chaos that often plagued other families. By the early 1950s, Gagliano had firmly established himself as a formidable figure in the American mafia landscape. His reputation was built not on headline-grabbing exploits but on strategic mastery, silent influence, and prudent decision-making. He became a figure whom law enforcement quietly respected for his elusiveness, rivals feared for his strategic acumen, and allies trusted for his discretion. Even in death, his legacy would endure, shaping the Lucchese family for decades to come and setting a model of leadership that contrasted sharply with the flamboyant violence often associated with organized crime. In this series, we will explore the life, methods, and legacy of Tommy Gagliano, examining how a man who shunned the spotlight could exert immense influence over one of New York's most powerful crime families. From his early years in Sicily to his quiet reign over the Lachise family, we will uncover the story of a man whose power lay in his silence, a strategist whose patience and foresight left an indelible mark on organized crime history. Tommy Galliano's journey from a young Sicilian immigrant to the powerful yet understated boss of the Lachise crime family is a story defined by patience, intelligence, and an almost unparalleled ability to read people and situations. Born in Palermo, Sicily, in 1892, Gagliano arrived in the United States during a wave of Italian immigration in the early 20th century. Like many newcomers, he faced the challenges of poverty, cultural displacement, and the struggle to find his place in a foreign land. Yet, unlike most, Gagliano quickly identified the unique opportunity that existed in the shadows of New York's bustling immigrant communities, where informal networks of mutual aid, loyalty, and often crime provided a path to power and influence. Settling in Manhattan and later moving to the Bronx, Gagliano began his life in America by engaging in small-scale operations. These early ventures were modest by comparison to the sprawling empire he would eventually control, but they were crucial in teaching him the fundamentals of the criminal underworld. He observed the dynamics of local gangs, the intricate relationships between street-level enforcers and influential bosses, and the delicate balance of trust, fear, and respect required to survive and thrive in these environments. Even in these early years, Gagliano demonstrated a remarkable capacity for discretion, avoiding unnecessary confrontations while carefully building alliances with more powerful figures. By the 1920s, the landscape of organized crime in New York was rapidly transforming. The era of prohibition had created unprecedented opportunities for those willing to take risks in the illegal liquor trade. Gagliano, however, did not seek notoriety through flashy bootlegging operations or violent power plays. Instead, he positioned himself as a reliable operator, someone who could quietly manage complex operations, maintain order, and navigate the competing interests of rival factions. This approach allowed him to steadily gain the trust of established bosses, including influential members of what would become the Lachise crime family. Gagliano's reputation for discretion and strategic thinking earned him a reputation as a dependable ally and a shrewd negotiator. While other ambitious men might have sought to climb the ranks through violence or public displays of power, Gagliano understood that true influence lay in controlling outcomes behind the scenes. He built relationships with labor leaders, politicians, and other crime figures, ensuring that the Lucci family's interests were protected without attracting undue attention. His network extended beyond street-level operations to include unions, construction contracts, and other legitimate businesses that could be leveraged to generate income and consolidate influence. A key factor in Gagliano's rise was his ability to identify and nurture talent within his organization. He surrounded himself with loyal, competent subordinates who shared his vision of quiet, disciplined control. By empowering trusted lieutenants to manage day-to-day operations, Gagliano was able to focus on strategy, long-term planning, and alliance building. This delegation not only strengthened his family internally but also minimized the risk of exposure or disruption from law enforcement and rival factions. Under his leadership, the Lucchese family developed a reputation for efficiency, loyalty, and discretion, a stark contrast to some of the more volatile and publicly notorious families in New York. Another defining feature of Gagliano's rise was his ability to navigate conflict without resorting to unnecessary violence. In an era when the mafia often relied on intimidation, murder, and overt displays of force to settle disputes, Gagliano preferred diplomacy and negotiation. He understood that unnecessary conflict drew law enforcement attention, destabilized operations, and endangered long-term profits. By carefully mediating disputes within his family and with other criminal organizations, he maintained stability and cohesion. This skill in conflict resolution further reinforced his reputation as a level-headed, reliable figure, a man whose counsel was respected even by those outside his immediate circle. During this period, the Lucchese family began to expand its reach into new criminal enterprises, including gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering. Gagliano's leadership style proved ideally suited to this diversification. He was methodical in assessing risk, patient in cultivating relationships, and strategic in allocating resources. Every move was calculated to maximize profit while minimizing exposure. Unlike some leaders who sought immediate gains at the expense of stability, Gagliano focused on long-term growth, ensuring that the family's power would endure beyond his own tenure. By the late 1930s, Gagliano had emerged as the undisputed leader of the Lucchese family. His rise was not marked by dramatic battles or sensational headlines, but by quiet consolidation, careful alliance building, and meticulous management. This approach earned him the nickname the Silent Architect, a reflection of his ability to shape the family's operations and strategy while remaining largely invisible to the public eye. Law enforcement recognized his influence but often struggled to link him directly to criminal acts, a testament to his emphasis on discretion and careful planning. One of the most significant aspects of Gagliano's leadership was his approach to succession and legacy. He understood that a crime family's survival depended not just on immediate profits or power, but on the cultivation of a disciplined, loyal structure capable of withstanding internal and external pressures. He invested in mentoring younger members, instilling in them the principle of loyalty, patience, and strategic thinking that had guided his own rise. This foresight ensured that the Lucchese family would remain strong and cohesive, even as the landscape of organized crime evolved over the decades. Tommy Gagliano's rise was in many ways a study in contrast. In a world often dominated by flamboyance, violence, and public notoriety, he achieved lasting power through silence, patience, and careful strategy. His story illustrates that influence does not always demand spectacle. Sometimes it is the quiet, calculating individuals, though, who work behind the scenes, observe, and act with precision, who leave the deepest mark on history. By the early 1950s, Gagliano had not only secured his position as the head of one of New York's most powerful crime families, but he also crafted a model of leadership that would guide the Lucchese family for generations to come. As we continue this series, we will explore the intricate details of Gagliano's operation, his key alliances, and the ways in which he navigated the complex web of organized crime. From the streets of New York to the boardrooms of labor unions, we will uncover the strategies, decisions, and foresight that define Tommy Gagliano, the Silent Architect, whose influence shaped one of the most enduring mafia families in American history. By the time Tommy Gagliano rose to the helm of the Lucchese crime family, he had mastered the art of quiet, effective leadership. Unlike the brash and flamboyant figures who often dominated the headlines, Gagliano ruled with subtlety, intelligence, and an unwavering focus on organization. His leadership style was not built on fear or intimidation alone, though. He commanded respect, but on trust, loyalty, and strategic foresight. These qualities not only solidified his personal position, but also laid the foundation for one of the most disciplined and enduring crime families in New York City history. Gagliano understood that power in organized crime was not merely about personal strength. It was about structuring the family in a way that ensured long-term stability and profitability. The Lucchese family, under his leadership, was meticulously organized, reflecting a clear hierarchy and defined responsibilities for each member. At the top was Gagliano himself, the boss, whose role was primarily strategic oversight and decision-making. Below him were the capos, or captains, who managed crews of soldiers and associates, ensuring that day-to-day operations ran smoothly. Each level of the organization was designed to function efficiently, while insulating Gagliano from direct exposure to criminal activity, a deliberate tactic that shielded him from law enforcement scrutiny. The family's structure extended beyond mere hierarchy. It encompassed codes of conduct, loyalty, and operational protocols that governed the actions of every member. Gagliano enforced strict discipline, insisting that all operations, whether gambling, loan sharking, or labor racketeering, were conducted with precision and discretion. Members were trained to avoid unnecessary violence and public attention, understanding that a quiet, organized approach would yield far greater long-term gains than reckless displays of power. This disciplined approach became a hallmark of the Lucchese family, distinguishing it from other, more volatile factions of the mafia in New York. Gagliano also recognized the importance of alliances, both within the mafia and in the broader social and economic landscape of the city. He cultivated relationships with other prominent crime families, including the Gambino, Genovese, and Bonanno organization. These alliances were not merely about convenience. They were strategic partnership designed to maintain balance, reduce conflict, and maximize profit. By fostering cooperation rather than rivalry, Gagliano was able to expand the Lucchese family's influence without triggering violent turf wars that could attract law enforcement attention. These alliances were often cemented through mutual respect, negotiated agreements, and at times, marriage or familial connections, reflecting the deeply networked nature of organized crime in mid-20th century New York. Within the Lucchese family, Gagliano's leadership style encouraged a sense of loyalty and shared purpose. He was known for rewarding competence, discretion, and reliability, ensuring that those who demonstrated these qualities advanced within the organization. Conversely, betrayal, incompetence, or disloyalty was met with swift and decisive consequences, though often handled with subtlety rather than overt violence. This balance of trust and accountability created a culture of respect and cohesion, allowing the family to operate efficiently and remain largely insulated from internal discord, a rare achievement in a world often marked by treachery and conflict. A crucial element of Gagliano's success was his ability to delegate effectively. He recognized that micromanaging every operation was not only inefficient, but also dangerous, as it increased the likelihood of exposure. Instead, he relied on trusted capos and lieutenants to oversee specific sectors of the family's activities, providing guidance and oversight without compromising operational security. This delegation not only optimized efficiency but also empowered key members, creating a network of loyalty and competence that reinforced Gagliano's authority. Each capo knew that their success reflected on the family as a whole, fostering a sense of collective responsibility that further stabilized the organization. Gagliano also emphasized the importance of financial management and long-term planning. Unlike leaders who prioritized immediate gains, he approached crime with the mindset of a strategist and businessman. Profits were carefully accounted for, investments were considered, and ventures were analyzed for risk and sustainability. This approach extended to both illicit and legitimate enterprises, as Gagliano understood that the most enduring power came from a diversified portfolio of income streams, from construction and trucking contracts to gambling and loan operations. The Lucchese family thrived under a system that combined strategic foresight with disciplined execution. Another aspect of Gagliano's leadership was his ability to maintain a low profile in public and with law enforcement. He rarely attracted attention, avoiding flashy displays of wealth or notoriety that often drew police scrutiny. This deliberate invisibility allowed the Lucchese family to operate with relative freedom, insulated from many of the pressures that other families faced. Even during periods of heightened law enforcement activity, Gagliano's careful approach minimized risk, protecting both himself and the organization. In many ways, his emphasis on discretion was as important as his operational skills, highlighting his understanding that survival in organized crime depended on both power and subtlety. Under Gagliano's guidance, the Lucchese family also developed a reputation for strategic patience in dealing with rivals. He understood that hasty actions often led to unintended consequences, including retaliation or legal attention. By taking a measured approach to conflicts, Gagliano was able to neutralize threats without unnecessary violence, using negotiation, influence, and strategic alliances to achieve his goals. This approach further reinforced the family's stability, allowing it to grow in influence while minimizing exposure to danger. Finally, Gagliano's leadership left a lasting legacy on the Lucchese family. His emphasis on discipline, discretion, loyalty, and strategic thinking became guiding principles for generations of members. The structures he established, clear hierarchies, operational protocols, and a culture of trust and accountability, ensured that the family remained strong even after his death. By prioritizing long-term stability over short-term gain, he created a model of leadership that contrasted sharply with the more violent and unpredictable approaches of other crime figures, solidifying his reputation as the silent architect of the Lucchese crime family. In examining Gagliano's leadership and the family structure he developed, it becomes clear that his power was derived not from fear or flamboyance, but from intelligence, patience, and meticulous planning. By organizing his family efficiently, fostering loyalty, and cultivating strategic alliances, he ensured the Lucchese family's dominance in the New York mafia landscape. His methods were subtle, his influence profound, and his legacy enduring, a testament to the fact that true power often lies in quiet control, calculated strategy, and disciplined execution. Tommy Gagliano's rise to power was not solely defined by his leadership style or organizational skills. It was equally a story of strategic business acumen and calculated control over a wide range of criminal enterprises. Under his guidance, the Lucchese crime family transformed from a modest, relatively obscure faction into a highly organized and profitable entity. Unlike more flamboyant mob bosses who relied on intimidation and public spectacle, Gagliano built his empire quietly, focusing on operations that generated consistent revenue, strengthened the family's influence, and minimized the risk of law enforcement interference. One of the family's primary sources of income under Gagliano was labor racketeering, a sophisticated form of organized crime that involved controlling unions, extorting businesses, and manipulating contracts for financial gain. Gagliano understood that labor unions were powerful tools in New York City's booming construction and shipping industries. By infiltrating unions and placing loyal members in positions of authority, the Lucchese family was able to influence hiring, manage labor disputes, and secure lucrative contracts. This allowed the family to extract payments from companies while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy, blending the worlds of lawful business and illicit control. Gagliano's involvement in labor racketeering was strategic and calculated. He avoided overt violence, relying instead on influence, negotiation, and intimidation when necessary to protect the family's interests. In addition to labor racketeering, gambling operations played a critical role in the Lucchese family's financial success. Under Gagliano, the family ran high-stakes betting networks, illegal casinos, and numbers rackets throughout New York. These operations were highly organized, often involving a network of trusted associates who managed day-to-day activities while reporting profits up the chain. Gagliano's ability to oversee these enterprises without drawing public attention was remarkable. He ensured that operations were discreet, that personnel were loyal and disciplined, and that enforcement measures were applied only when absolutely necessary. By doing so, he maximized profits while maintaining the family's low profile, avoiding the type of sensational exposure that had brought down other crime figures. Loan sharking was another significant aspect of Gagliano's empire. By offering high-interest loans to individuals and businesses in need of quick capital, the Lucchese family was able to generate substantial revenue while exerting influence over borrowers. This was not merely a financial operation, it was also a tool of control. Borrowers who defaulted risked repercussions, which ranged from financial penalties to more coercive measures if required. However, Gagliano's approach was measured. He understood that unnecessary brutality could attract unwanted attention and destabilize the family's operations. Loan sharking, therefore, was conducted with a mix of business acumen and strategic enforcement, balancing profit with operational security. Another critical component of Gagliano's criminal network was racketeering in the entertainment and hospitality sectors. By controlling clubs, bars, and theaters, the family was able to generate legitimate-looking revenue streams while also creating venues for gambling, extortion, and other illicit activities. These establishments often served as hubs for the family's operations, allowing Gagliano to monitor activities, gather intelligence, and maintain control over his network. This blending of legitimate and illegal enterprises was a hallmark of his strategy, reflecting a deep understanding of both business management and organized crime dynamics. The strategic expansion of the family's influence was another testament to Gagliano's skill. He did not pursue rapid growth for its own sake. Every new venture, alliance, or territory was carefully evaluated for risk and reward. He avoided unnecessary conflicts with rival families, opting instead for negotiation and mutually beneficial agreements. In some cases, this meant sharing territories or profits. In others, it involved subtle intimidation to secure compliance. Through this strategic expansion, Gagliano ensured that the Lucchese family's influence extended across multiple sectors of New York's criminal underworld without triggering destructive power struggles. Gagliano's methods were also notable for their emphasis on operational security and discretion. He was acutely aware of the growing attention of law enforcement, especially in the post-prohibition era, when federal agencies began to focus on organized crime networks more aggressively. To mitigate risk, Gagliano implemented strict protocols for communication, ensured that only trusted members handled sensitive matters, and maintained a careful separation between himself and the day-to-day operations that could expose him to prosecution. This combination of strategic planning, delegation, and discretion allowed the Lucchese family to flourish in a city teeming with rivals, criminal competition, and legal scrutiny. Partnerships and alliances were also a critical part of Gagliano's criminal strategy. He recognized that cooperation with other mafia families and influential figures was often more profitable than conflict. By negotiating mutually beneficial arrangements with the Gambino, Genovese, and Bonanno family, he was able to secure operational stability and expand revenue streams without inciting wars. These alliances were carefully maintained, based on trust, respect, and sometimes shared heritage, reflecting the intricate social fabric of the mafia in New York. Gagliano's ability to navigate these relationships quietly and effectively reinforced his reputation as a master strategist. Throughout his reign, Gagliano maintained a strict philosophy: profit were to be maximized, risk minimized, and discretion prioritized. This approach was not only a reflection of his intelligence and foresight, but also a survival strategy. In an era when mafia figures were frequently brought down by law enforcement or violent rivalries, by carefully managing his family's criminal enterprises, cultivating alliances, and enforcing discipline within his ranks, Gagliano created a resilient and highly profitable organization. His methods stood in contrast to the flamboyant violence of other families, demonstrating that long-term stability often outweighs immediate gains achieved through reckless action. By the early 1950s, the Lucchese family, under Tommy Gagliano, had become a formidable force in New York's underworld. The family's success was not merely in terms of financial gain. It lay in its cohesion, strategic influence, and operational efficiency. Gagliano's approach, calculated, quiet, and patient ensured that the family could withstand challenges both from within and outside its ranks. He had proven that true power in organized crime was not always the loudest or bloodiest, but often the most controlled, deliberate, and intelligent. As we continue this series, we will delve deeper into the personal strategies, alliance, and key figures who worked alongside Galliano to expand the Lucchese empire. From labor racketeering to gambling, from loan sharking to strategic diplomacy, we will uncover the methods that allowed the silent architect to quietly build one of the most enduring criminal dynasties in New York history. Tommy Galliano's influence over the Lucchese crime family was undeniable, but his true mastery extended beyond his own organization. One of the most critical aspects of his power lay in his ability to navigate the complex web of relationships between New York's five families. In a city where rivalries could erupt into open warfare at a moment's notice, Gagliano's skill in diplomacy, negotiation, and strategic alliances ensured that the Lucchese family remained both powerful and relatively secure. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who relied on violence to assert dominance, Gagliano understood that alliance, carefully maintained, mutually beneficial and discreet, could achieve far more enduring results. Gagliano's connections with other families, particularly the Gambino, Genovese, and Bonanno families, were carefully cultivated. These relationships were based on a combination of personal trust, shared interests, and strategic necessity. In the volatile world of organized crime, trust was both rare and invaluable. Galliano earned it through his reputation for discretion, fairness in negotiation, and a consistent avoidance of unnecessary conflicts. Other bosses recognized that he was not a man to be provoked recklessly. His silence was as powerful as any threat, and his strategic foresight often allowed him to neutralize potential conflicts before they escalated. One of the key principles guiding Gagliano's alliances was the idea of mutual benefit. He understood that cooperation with rival families could increase profit margins, reduce operational risk, and stabilize territories. For example, sharing access to lucrative rackets such as gambling, labor control, and construction contracts allowed families to avoid costly turf wars while expanding their influence. These alliances were rarely publicized. They existed in the shadows, cemented through informal agreements, private meetings, and, occasionally, the trusted mediation of neutral figures within the mafia network. This subtle approach to diplomacy was a hallmark of Gagliano's leadership, and it strengthened the Lucchese family without drawing law enforcement attention. In addition to alliances with other families, Gagliano also maintained key partnerships with influential lieutenants and associates who managed relationships with rivals and ensured operational cohesion. These trusted figures acted as intermediaries, negotiating agreements, monitoring rival activity, and preventing misunderstandings that could escalate into violence. By empowering loyal subordinates to handle delicate negotiations, Gagliano could focus on broader strategy while maintaining a protective layer between himself and the potential dangers of direct confrontation. This delegation of authority was a calculated risk, but one that paid dividends in stability, loyalty, and organizational efficiency. Gagliano's ability to balance power and diplomacy was particularly evident during periods of tension between families. In many cases, disputes arose over territories, rackets, or personal grievances. Rather than responding with brute force, Gagliano employed negotiation, leverage, and subtle influence to resolve conflicts. He recognized that unnecessary violence not only endangered profits, but also attracted law enforcement scrutiny. By managing disputes through diplomacy, he strengthened both his family's internal cohesion and its external reputation as a stable and reliable organization. This approach earned him respect among allies and rivals alike, further consolidating his influence in New York's underworld. One of the most notable aspects of Gagliano's interfamily relationships was his ability to identify and exploit opportunities for strategic alliances. For instance, during periods of heightened competition over labor rackets or gambling operations, Gagliano would negotiate partnerships that allowed both parties to profit without resorting to open conflict. These agreements often included profit-sharing arrangements, allocation of territories, or joint management of operations. By structuring relationships in this way, he minimized risk, ensured loyalty, and positioned the Lucchese family as a cooperative yet formidable force in the criminal landscape. Gagliano also understood the importance of long-term planning and interfamily diplomacy. He did not view alliances as temporary or opportunistic. Instead, he sought relationships that could endure over decades, providing stability for future generations. By fostering loyalty and trust across family lines, he reduced the likelihood of sudden betrayals or violent escalation. These enduring alliances contributed significantly to the Lucchese family's ability to operate efficiently, expand influence, and maintain profitability in a competitive and often hostile environment. In addition to formal alliances, Gagliano also relied on informal networks of influence. These included connections with politicians, law enforcement officials, and community leaders who could provide protection, advance interests, or offer early warnings of potential threats. By cultivating these relationships discreetly, he created an invisible safety net that allowed the family to operate with greater freedom. Gagliano's strategic use of influence extended beyond his immediate circle, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of power dynamics that transcended the boundaries of the mafia itself. Despite his focus on diplomacy, Gagliano was never naive. He understood that alliances could be fragile, and he maintained a careful balance of trust and vigilance. While he sought cooperation, he also prepared contingencies for betrayal or conflict. This combination of foresight, strategic patience, and operational control allowed him to navigate the treacherous world of organized crime with remarkable success. Rivals knew that while Gagliano preferred negotiation, he could respond decisively if pushed, a duality that enhanced both respect and caution among his peers. The outcomes of Gagliano's strategic alliances were profound. Through his careful diplomacy, the Lucchese family was able to expand its reach, secure valuable rackets, and maintain relative stability even as rival families engaged in violent conflicts elsewhere in New York. These alliances reinforced the family's reputation as disciplined, efficient, and strategically minded, distinguishing it from other factions whose notoriety often came at the cost of internal chaos or law enforcement attention. By the early 1950s, the Lucchese family was widely recognized as a well-organized, respected, and powerful entity in the city's criminal landscape, an achievement that owed as much to Gagliano's strategic alliances as to his internal leadership. Ultimately, Gagliano's ability to manage relationships with other mafia bosses and navigate the complex web of New York's underworld exemplifies his brilliance as a strategist. While many crime figures relied on brute force or flamboyant displays of power, Gagliano understood that the quiet exercise of influence, the cultivation of trust, and the careful negotiation of alliances could achieve more enduring results. His legacy as the silent architect of the Lucchese crime family is inseparable from his talent for diplomacy, his foresight and strategic planning, and his mastery of interfamily relations, qualities that allowed him to build one of the most resilient and successful criminal organizations in American history. Tommy Gagliano's reign over the Lucchese crime family was remarkable not only for its strategic brilliance and organizational efficiency, but also for his extraordinary ability to remain largely invisible to law enforcement. In an era when federal and local authorities were increasingly focused on cracking down on organized crime, Gagliano operated with a level of discretion that was unparalleled among his peers. His reputation as the silent architect was not simply due to his quiet leadership. It was also a reflection of his mastery in avoiding attention, prosecution, and public scrutiny, allowing his family to thrive under the radar. Unlike many mafia bosses of his era, who gained notoriety through violent displays, flamboyant lifestyle, or high-profile criminal acts, Gagliano understood that visibility was dangerous. He avoided ostentation, conducted his affairs privately, and maintained a low personal profile. While other figures attracted media coverage and police surveillance, Gagliano's careful management and strategic invisibility kept him out of the public eye. This deliberate obscurity was not passive. It was an essential component of his leadership, allowing him to consolidate power without unnecessary exposure. One of the key methods Gagliano employed to evade law enforcement was strict operational compartmentalization. He ensured that sensitive activities, such as gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering, were managed by trusted subordinates rather than himself. By delegating control over these operations, he minimized direct ties to criminal activity, creating a buffer between himself and potential legal jeopardy. Capos and soldiers carried out day-to-day enforcement, collected profits, and handled disputes, reporting up the chain only through secure and discreet channels. This approach insulated Gagliano from the type of evidence and witness testimony that often led to convictions against other mafia leaders. Gagliano also understood the importance of careful communication and secrecy. Meetings were conducted in private. Instructions were often given indirectly, and sensitive discussions were limited to a small circle of trusted advisors. He avoided written records whenever possible, relying instead on personal memory, coded language, and verbal directives. This practice minimized the risk of incriminating evidence falling into the hands of authorities, a vulnerability that had undone many of his contemporaries. By controlling the flow of information, Gagliano ensured that his strategic decisions and personal involvement remained largely undetectable. Another significant factor in Gagliano's success in evading law enforcement was his use of legitimate businesses as a cover for criminal activity. The family's involvement in construction, Trucking and entertainment allowed him to blend illicit operations with lawful enterprises, providing plausible deniability and complicating investigative efforts. By integrating legitimate and illegitimate activities, he not only generated additional revenue streams but also created layers of protection against legal scrutiny. Businesses provided a facade of respectability, masking the extensive network of rackets that sustained the Lucchese family's power. Gagliano also carefully managed the behavior of his subordinates to reduce exposure to law enforcement. He demanded discipline, discretion, and loyalty, ensuring that members avoided public altercations, sensational crimes, or actions that could attract attention. Violent acts, when necessary, were conducted with precision and secrecy, often in ways that left minimal evidence or witnesses. By instilling a culture of careful conduct and operational security, he minimized risks that could compromise the family or his personal freedom. Members understood that maintaining invisibility was as important as profitability, and this philosophy became deeply ingrained in the Lucchese organization. In addition to these internal measures, Gagliano leveraged influence and relationships outside the family to further protect himself. Connections with politicians, union leaders, and certain law enforcement officials provided an additional layer of security. While not necessarily corrupt in every case, these relationships often facilitated early warnings about investigation, strategic advice, or subtle interference that allowed the family to adjust operations preemptively. Gagliano's ability to cultivate influence beyond the underworld demonstrated his understanding that organized crime was not just about force or intimidation, it was also about political and social navigation. Despite his low profile, Gagliano's reputation alone acted as a deterrent to law enforcement and rivals alike. His meticulous control, strategic foresight, and network of loyal subordinates made it clear that any attempt to challenge him directly could be costly and unpredictable. Investigators often found themselves pursuing leads that yielded little result, as Gagliano had insulated himself from actionable evidence and surrounded himself with individuals who were careful, loyal, and disciplined. Even in high-profile investigations into New York's mafia, his name rarely appeared as a primary target, a testament to his mastery of discretion and operational security. Gagliano's approach to law enforcement avoidance also relied on strategic patience. He understood that time could be as powerful a tool as force. By avoiding rash decisions or impulsive acts, he reduced the likelihood of incidents that could attract attention. He waited for opportunities, calculated risks carefully, and allowed his subordinate to handle sensitive matters while maintaining a safe distance. This patient, measured approach not only preserved his freedom but also reinforced the stability and profitability of the Lucchese family over decades. It is important to note that Gagliano's ability to evade law enforcement was not merely a product of luck, it was the result of intentional, disciplined strategy. Every aspect of his leadership, from delegation to communication, from alliance to operational design, was executed with an awareness of legal vulnerability. By combining intelligence, foresight, and operational security, he crafted a criminal empire that could endure even as authorities increased their focus on organized crime in the post-prohibition era. In the end, Gagliano's mastery of discretion and evasion ensured that he could operate the Lucchese crime family with unprecedented stability and longevity. His silent approach allowed the family to expand its reach, solidify its influence, and build a legacy that would outlast his own lifetime. He demonstrated that in the dangerous world of organized crime, visibility was vulnerability, and the true measure of power was often found not in violence or spectacle, but in the ability to operate effectively while remaining unseen. By the early 1950s, the Lucchese family had become one of the most formidable, profitable, and stable organizations in New York, and much of that success could be attributed to Gagliano's skill in eluding law enforcement and protecting his empire from exposure. His legacy as the silent architect was cemented not only through his leadership and alliances, but also through his exceptional ability to remain in the shadows, ensuring the Lucchese family's survival and prosperity in an era when many crime families faced violence, betrayal, and legal challenges. Tommy Gagliano's public image may have been shrouded in mystery, but understanding the man behind the silence is crucial to appreciating the remarkable control and influence he wielded over the Lucchese crime family. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who cultivated notoriety through flamboyance, brutality, or public spectacle, Gagliano operated with restraint, discretion, and a deep understanding of human nature. His personality, temperament, and values were not merely incidental, they shaped the very structure, culture, and longevity of the criminal empire he built. Born in Palermo, Sicily, Gagliano grew up in a world where loyalty, respect, and strategic thinking were essential for survival. These early lessons were deeply ingrained and became guiding principles throughout his life. Even as he navigated the dangerous world of organized crime in New York, Gagliano's Sicilian heritage, emphasis on family bonds, honor, and measured decision-making remained a cornerstone of his approach. Unlike many who sought quick gains or notoriety, he believed in patient accumulation of power, careful cultivation of relationships, and maintaining order within his sphere of influence. This philosophy set him apart in an era often defined by impulsive violence. Gagliano's temperament was remarkably calm and deliberate, earning him his reputation as the silent architect. He was not the type to react rashly to provocation or act without considering the long-term consequences of his decisions. This quiet, measured approach allowed him to maintain control over a complex organization without constant displays of force. Members of the Lucchese family knew that while Gagliano rarely raised his voice or made public threats, his decisions were final and carried immense weight. Respect for his authority came not from fear of sudden violence alone but from recognition of his intelligence, foresight, and ability to anticipate outcomes. Despite his quiet nature, Gagliano was highly observant and attuned to the personalities, motivations, and weaknesses of those around him. He understood that leadership was not only about directing operations but also about managing people alliances, rivalries, and internal dynamics. This keen insight into human behavior allowed him to place the right people in the right position, mediate conflicts before they escalated, and maintain cohesion within the family. His ability to read situations and people was a powerful tool, enabling him to neutralize threats subtly and maintain influence without resorting to public confrontation. Gagliano was also known for his discipline and personal restraint. While many mafia figures indulged in ostentatious lifestyles or conspicuous displays of wealth, Gagliano remained understated. He avoided drawing attention to himself through lavish homes, expensive cars, or public appearances. This not only protected him from law enforcement but also reinforced his image as a leader whose authority came from wisdom and strategy rather than spectacle. His personal restraint sent a clear message to both allies and rivals. The true measure of power was control, foresight, and operational skill, not appearances or flamboyance. Family was another cornerstone of Gagliano's character. While his public persona emphasized discretion and strategic thinking, those close to him observed a man who valued loyalty, trust, and personal relationships deeply. He cultivated a sense of familial bonds within the Lucchese organization, treating trusted lieutenants and soldiers as extensions of his inner circle. This emphasis on loyalty created a culture of mutual respect, accountability, and cohesion that allowed the family to operate efficiently. Members understood that their success and security were intertwined with the well-being of the family as a whole, reinforcing both operational discipline and long-term stability. Gagliano's personal relationships extended beyond the organization as well. He carefully cultivated alliances and connections outside the immediate world of organized crime, including relationships with union officials, businessmen, and, at times, political figures. These relationships were strategic, designed to protect the family, gather intelligence, and secure operational advantages. Yet, even in these dealings, Gagliano's personality dictated a subtle, measured approach. He avoided overt bribery or corruption that could attract attention, relying instead on influence, trust, and reciprocal benefit to achieve his objectives. Another defining feature of Gagliano's character was his patience. Unlike some of his contemporaries who sought immediate gratification or engaged in impulsive acts of violence to assert dominance, Gagliano approached problems and opportunities with a long-term perspective. He was willing to wait for the right moment to act, understanding that timing could make the difference between success and disaster. This patience extended to both internal family management and external negotiations with rivals and allies. By exercising restraint, Gagliano minimized risk, maximized strategic advantage, and ensured the continued prosperity of the Lucchese family. Despite his reputation for calm and calculated leadership, Gagliano was not without the capacity for firmness and decisiveness when necessary. While he preferred negotiation, influence, and subtlety, he could act decisively to protect the family's interests or discipline disloyal members. His rare use of direct action was more effective precisely because it was uncommon and unexpected, reinforcing his authority without undermining the culture of discretion he cultivated. Members knew that while Gagliano's approach was typically quiet, it was always backed by the capacity for decisive enforcement when required. Gagliano's personality also influenced the overall culture of the Lucchese family. Under his leadership, the family became known for efficiency, organization, loyalty, and discretion. Violence was used as a last resort, profits were prioritized, and operations were carefully structured to minimize risk. This culture was a direct reflection of Gagliano's own character: quiet, disciplined, strategic, and patient. By embedding these values into the family's operations, he ensured that the Lucchese family could endure challenge, avoid unnecessary exposure, and remain one of New York's most formidable organized crime organizations. In summary, Tommy Galliano was a man whose personal traits calmness, patience, discretion, intelligence, and loyalty were inseparable from his success as a mafia boss. His personality shaped the Lucchese family's operations, culture, and longevity, demonstrating that true leadership in the underworld was not always about violence, ostentation, or public notoriety. Instead, it was about strategic thinking, careful relationship management, operational discipline, and the ability to act decisively when required. As we continue this series, the next chapters will explore the challenges Galliano faced from rivals, the key events that tested his leadership, how his personality and strategies allowed him to navigate these dangers, while maintaining the stability and prosperity of the Lucchese family. In the shadowy world of organized crime, power is never guaranteed, and no empire remains unchallenged. For Tommy Galliano, maintaining control over the Lucchese crime family required not only strategic planning and operational efficiency but also an acute awareness of potential threats both from rival families and internal challengers. What set Galliano apart from many other mafia bosses of his time was his ability to manage these conflicts with patience, intelligence, and minimal violence, ensuring that the family remained stable and profitable despite constant pressures. The New York mafia landscape in the mid-20th century was a complex and often volatile environment. The five families, the Gambino, Genovese, Bonanno, Colombo, and Lucchese organizations were all vying for influence over territories, rackets, and lucrative criminal enterprises. Conflicts between families could escalate quickly, resulting in assassination, violent retribution, and law enforcement crackdowns. Unlike some leaders who relied on brute force or public displays of power to assert dominance, Galliano relied on diplomacy, alliances, and careful negotiation to neutralize threats and maintain his family's security. One of the primary challenges Galliano faced came from territorial disputes and competition over rackets, particularly in labor unions, gambling, and construction contracts. These were high-stakes areas that could generate enormous profits but also provoke conflict. Galliano addressed these threats with foresight, often negotiating agreements with rival families to divide territories or share profits. These arrangements were carefully structured to avoid conflict, reduce risk, and ensure mutual benefit. By prioritizing cooperation over confrontation, he minimized the likelihood of violent clashes in position. The Lucchese family is a stable and reliable organization in the eyes of allies and rivals alike. Internal threats were another area where Galliano's strategic mind proved invaluable. Like any criminal organization, the Lucchese family faced the potential for disloyalty, ambition, and betrayal from within its ranks. Ambitious capos or soldiers could challenge authority or make impulsive decisions that risked exposure. Galliano addressed these internal pressures through a combination of loyalty cultivation, careful delegation, and measured enforcement. By rewarding competence and discretion, mentoring key lieutenants and addressing issues before they escalated, he maintained cohesion and loyalty. This approach ensured that internal challenges were managed quietly and efficiently, without destabilizing the family or drawing attention from law enforcement. Galliano also had to contend with the constant threat of law enforcement investigation. While he had mastered the art of evasion, external pressures still created risks. Rivals sometimes attempted to exploit these investigations by sowing discord or creating opportunities for takeover. Galliano responded with strategic patience and careful planning, avoiding rash actions that could expose the family. He ensured that operations were insulated, communications were discreet, and decisions were made with full consideration of legal and operational risks. In doing so, he protected both the family and his personal freedom, maintaining control even under intense scrutiny. Despite his preference for diplomacy and patience, Galliano was not passive in the face of threats. When necessary, he could act decisively to neutralize challenges. However, unlike many leaders who resorted to immediate violence, Galliano's approach was calculated. He relied on intelligence, strategic leverage, and the careful use of influence to eliminate or mitigate threats. Violence was a tool of last resort, deployed only when other methods failed, and even then, it was executed discreetly to avoid public attention or law enforcement action. This careful balance of deterrence and restraint made him a formidable opponent while preserving the family's long-term stability. A critical aspect of Galliano's success in navigating rivalries was his ability to build and maintain alliances. These alliances were not static. They required constant attention, negotiation, and adaptation. Galliano cultivated relationships with other mafia bosses, capos, and key figures in the criminal and political landscape. By maintaining open lines of communication, honoring agreements, and demonstrating reliability, he ensured the potential conflicts were managed before they escalated. Rivals came to recognize that while Galliano was cautious and discreet, he was also strategically shrewd and difficult to undermine. In some cases, Gagliano's diplomacy allowed him to turn potential rivals into allies. By understanding their motivations, needs, and vulnerabilities, he negotiated arrangements that were mutually beneficial, avoiding unnecessary bloodshed while expanding his influence. This ability to transform competition into cooperation exemplifies the intelligence and foresight that defined his leadership. Rather than relying on intimidation alone, Gagliano leveraged relationship, trust, and shared interests to achieve long-term stability. Even when dealing with violent or unpredictable figures, Gagliano maintained control through strategic positioning and psychological insight. He understood the importance of perception and reputation. By cultivating an image of calm authority and measured response, he influenced the behavior of allies and rivals alike. His silence was powerful. It created an aura of unpredictability that made opponents cautious, knowing that any miscalculated move could provoke a subtle but decisive reaction. This psychological mastery reinforced his authority, while minimizing the need for open confrontation. Another key factor in Gagliano's management of rivalries was his understanding of timing and patience. He recognized that acting too quickly or impulsively could create opportunities for retaliation or legal exposure. By waiting for the right moment, carefully assessing risks, and choosing interventions with precision, he maximized the impact of his actions while minimizing potential downsides. This strategic patience was a hallmark of his leadership, distinguishing him from more impulsive or flamboyant figures in organized crime. Through these methods, diplomacy, alliances, internal management, strategic patience, and selective enforcement, Gagliano successfully navigated some of the most dangerous dynamics of New York's underworld. He maintained the stability and profitability of the Lacchese family while avoiding the violent conflicts that plagued many rival organizations. His reputation as the silent architect was not merely a reflection of his quiet demeanor, it was a testament to his exceptional skill in handling threats, managing rivals, and preserving long-term power. By the early 1950s, Gagliano's ability to navigate rivalries had firmly established the Lacchese family as one of the most resilient and influential criminal organizations in New York. While other families experienced violent upheavals or internal betrayals, the Lacchese family remained disciplined, cohesive, and strategically positioned. Gagliano had proven that power in organized crime was not solely the product of force, fear, or spectacle, but often the result of intelligence, patience, and subtle influence. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's mastery in managing rivalries, both external and internal, was a cornerstone of his success. His ability to anticipate threats, negotiate alliances, enforce discipline, and act strategically ensured that the Lacchese family could grow, prosper, and endure in a world defined by volatility and danger. This skill, combined with his discretion and operational acumen, solidified his legacy as one of the most effective and enduring mafia bosses in American history. One of Tommy Gagliano's most remarkable achievements was not only the expansion and stabilization of the Lucchese crime family under his leadership, but also his careful planning for the future. Unlike many mafia bosses who focus solely on immediate power and profits, Gagliano understood that the survival of his organization depended on long-term planning, mentorship, and the cultivation of a capable next generation of leaders. His approach to succession ensured that the Lacchese family would continue to thrive even after his eventual retirement or death, a testament to both his strategic foresight and his dedication to stability. Succession planning in the mafia is never straightforward. Leadership transitions often provoke internal rivalries, power struggles, and even violent conflicts. Gagliano's genius lay in his ability to prepare for this eventuality quietly and effectively, minimizing disruption while maintaining loyalty and cohesion within the family. He recognized that the selection of a successor was not merely a matter of preference or lineage. It required careful consideration of competence, loyalty, strategic vision, and the ability to maintain alliances. In doing so, he created a process that balanced merit, trust, and organizational stability. Central to Gagliano's approach was the mentorship of key lieutenants and trusted associates. He invested significant time and effort in developing their skills, teaching them the principles of operational control, strategic negotiation, and discreet management that had defined his own leadership. These protégés were not only trained in the family's criminal enterprises, gambling, labor racketeering, loan sharking, and construction, but also in leadership, diplomacy, and the subtleties of interfamily alliances. Gagliano's mentorship ensured that the next generation of leaders would uphold the principles of discretion, strategic thinking, and organizational efficiency that had made the Lacchese family so resilient. Gagliano's succession planning was also strategic in maintaining stability across the family's hierarchy. He carefully assessed the loyalty, competence, and temperament of potential successors, ensuring that the chosen leader would have the respect and trust of the family's key capos, soldiers, and associates. By involving trusted advisors and aligning the family's leadership with individuals who shared his vision, Gagliano minimized the risk of internal conflict or fragmentation. His emphasis on loyalty and shared values created continuity and reinforced the family's culture of discipline and discretion. A critical element of this preparation was the cultivation of alliance with other mafia families that could influence succession dynamics. Gagliano understood that external approval and recognition were often necessary to prevent challenges from rival organizations. By maintaining strong relationships with other bosses, negotiating agreements, and ensuring mutual benefit, he safeguarded the succession process. These alliances provided additional legitimacy to the chosen successor and reduced the likelihood of interference or opposition, reinforcing both stability and continuity within the family. Gagliano also approached succession with patience and timing. He avoided sudden, unilateral decisions that could provoke uncertainty or resentment. Instead, he allowed potential successors to demonstrate their abilities over time, observing how they handled operational challenges, negotiated disputes, and maintained loyalty among their subordinates. This patient evaluation ensured that the transition of power would not only be smooth, but also rooted in proven competence and strategic alignment. By the time Gagliano was ready to step aside, the next leader was already recognized and respected within the organization, minimizing the risk of disruption. The principles Gagliano instilled in his successors reflected his broader philosophy of leadership, discretion, strategy, and long-term stability over short-term gain. He taught that visible displays of power were less important than operational control, that alliances were often more effective than violence, and that careful planning ensured the survival of both the family and its leadership. These lessons became embedded in the culture of the Lucchese family, guiding future generations and allowing the organization to endure challenges that would have destabilized less disciplined families. One of the most significant aspects of Gagliano's succession strategy was his ability to identify leaders who could preserve his legacy while adapting to changing circumstances. He recognized that the criminal landscape was evolving, and the family needed a leader who could navigate new challenges without undermining the principles that had ensured its success. This foresight allowed the Lucchese family to maintain continuity while remaining adaptable, a balance that is difficult to achieve in any organization, let alone one operating in the high-risk, clandestine world of organized crime. Gagliano's meticulous planning extended to the financial and operational foundations of the family. By ensuring that revenue streams were secure, operations were well structured, and alliances were maintained, he left his successor with a stable and profitable organization. This preparation minimized the vulnerability that often accompanies leadership transitions, where rivals or law enforcement might exploit uncertainty. By creating a solid operational base, Gagliano reinforced the family's resilience and ensured that power could be transferred smoothly without jeopardizing long-term stability. The Lucchese family's post-Gagliano era demonstrated the effectiveness of his succession planning. Following his leadership, the family remained disciplined, cohesive, and strategically focused, avoiding the chaos and fragmentation that plagued other organizations after the departure of a long-serving boss. Gagliano's foresight, mentorship, and attention to succession had created a model of continuity that allowed the family to thrive for decades. Beyond his tenure, cementing his reputation as the silent architect not only in life, but also in the enduring structure of his organization. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's approach to succession was a testament to his intelligence, patience, and strategic foresight. By mentoring capable leaders, cultivating loyalty, securing alliances, and carefully managing operational continuity, he ensured that the Lucchese family would remain a dominant and disciplined force in organized crime. His legacy was not only the empire he built during his lifetime, but also the foundation he left for the family's future, a testament to the power of planning, mentorship, and strategic leadership in one of the most challenging environments imaginable. As we continue this series, the next chapters will explore the rise of key figures under Gagliano's mentorship, the continued expansion of the Lucchese family, and the challenges and opportunities faced by the organization in the decades following his leadership. Tommy Gagliano's brilliance as a leader was not solely measured by the strength of the Lucchese crime family during his tenure, but also by how effectively he prepared the organization for the future. Central to this preparation was the careful cultivation of protégés who would inherit the family's operations and maintain its stability. Among these rising figures, one name stands out: Tommy Lucchese, a man who would eventually succeed Gagliano and become synonymous with the family's golden era. The transition from Gagliano to Lucchese represents a carefully managed evolution of power, blending mentorship, loyalty, and strategic foresight into a seamless continuation of leadership. From the earliest stages of his rise, Lachise demonstrated the qualities Gagliano valued most: intelligence, discretion, loyalty, and a keen understanding of both criminal and legitimate enterprise. Recognizing these traits, Gagliano took a personal interest in shaping Lachise's approach to leadership. This mentorship went beyond teaching the mechanics of racketeering, gambling, or labor manipulation. It involved imparting a philosophy of leadership rooted in strategic patience, measured influence, and operational control. Lachise learned that visibility was a liability, that alliances were as powerful as violence, and that careful planning ensured both survival and prosperity. Gagliano's approach to mentorship was subtle yet highly effective. He allowed protégés like Lachise to assume increasing responsibility within the family, testing their skills in negotiation, problem-solving, and operational management. By gradually exposing them to challenges and observing their responses, Gagliano ensured that only the most capable and trustworthy individuals advanced into positions of power. This hands-on guidance allowed Lachise to gain the experience necessary to manage the family's complex operations while internalizing the principles that had made Gagliano so successful. An essential aspect of this transition was maintaining organizational stability during the transfer of authority. Succession in organized crime is often fraught with danger, as ambitious capos or rival factions may attempt to exploit the moment of change. Gagliano mitigated these risks by cultivating loyalty across all levels of the family, ensuring that key subordinates supported Lachise's rise. He reinforced the culture of discipline, respect, and discretion that had characterized the Lachise family, making it clear that challenges to the emerging leadership would not be tolerated. This careful management preserved unity and prevented the internal discord that often accompanies leadership changes. Lachise's rise was also facilitated by external relationships that Gagliano had meticulously cultivated. Alliances with other mafia families, union leaders, and influential figures in the business and political world provided a framework of stability for the incoming leadership. Lachise inherited not only the operational infrastructure of the family but also a network of alliances that allowed him to maintain the family's influence and profitability. By ensuring continuity in both internal and external relationships, Gagliano set the stage for a smooth transition and the continued dominance of the Lachise family. During this period, Gagliano emphasized the importance of discretion and strategic thinking in Lachise's development. He taught that public notoriety, reckless displays of power, or impulsive violence could jeopardize the family's long-term stability. Instead, success required patience, careful assessment of opportunities, and the ability to negotiate complex relationships. Lachise absorbed these lessons, demonstrating an ability to combine the tactical knowledge of a seasoned operator with the strategic foresight of a visionary leader. This combination would prove crucial in the family's continued growth and dominance. The transition also involved a careful balance between tradition and innovation. While Lachise inherited the principles and structures established by Gagliano, he was encouraged to adapt to changing circumstances in the criminal landscape. Gagliano recognized that the underworld was dynamic, and that successful leadership required flexibility in strategy, diversification of operations, and the cultivation of new opportunities. By allowing Lachise room to innovate within the framework of established principles, Gagliano ensured that the family could evolve without compromising its stability or core values. Mentorship under Gagliano also focused on ethical enforcement, internal cohesion. Lachise was taught to maintain loyalty, manage disputes discreetly, and reward competence while punishing betrayal in a measured manner. These lessons created a culture of respect and accountability within the family, reinforced the disciplined structure that had allowed the Lachise organization to thrive for decades. The principles instilled during this period became the foundation of Lachise's leadership style, allowing him to consolidate power while preserving the integrity and cohesion of the family. As Lachise assumed greater responsibilities, Gagliano gradually shifted the operational spotlight, allowing his protégé to take the lead in negotiations, decision-making, and strategic planning. This gradual transfer of authority ensured that the transition appeared seamless, both to members of the family and to external allies. Gagliano remained a guiding presence, offering advice and support while stepping back from day-to-day management, allowing Lachise to demonstrate his capabilities and earn the respect of the family. The eventual succession marked not only a change in leadership but also a continuation of Gagliano's legacy. Lachise built upon the solid foundation established by his mentor, expanding the family's influence, modernizing operations, and maintaining the principles of discipline, discretion, and strategic alliances that had defined Gagliano's tenure. The smooth transition demonstrated the effectiveness of Gagliano's mentorship, succession planning, and organizational foresight, cementing his reputation as the silent architect, not only for the stability he achieved during his life but for the enduring strength of the family he had nurtured. In summary, the rise of Gagliano's protégés, particularly Tommy Lucchese, illustrates the critical role of mentorship, strategic planning, and careful succession in organized crime leadership. By cultivating capable successors, reinforcing loyalty, maintaining alliances, and teaching the principles of discretion and strategic foresight, Gagliano ensured the continued prosperity of the Lucchese crime family. His influence extended far beyond his tenure, shaping the family's trajectory and securing a legacy of stability, power, and resilience that endured well into the latter half of the 20th century. Tommy Gagliano's leadership of the Lucchese crime family was defined not only by discretion and strategic alliance, but also by a careful, methodical expansion of the family's power and influence across New York City. Under his guidance, the organization moved beyond mere survival and became a well-structured, highly profitable empire, carefully integrated into both the underworld and legitimate business sectors. The expansion of operations was deliberate, disciplined, and calculated to maximize revenue while minimizing exposure, a hallmark of Gagliano's leadership style. One of the most significant areas of growth during Gagliano's tenure was the family's gambling operation. New York City, with its thriving population and bustling urban life, provided a fertile environment for illegal betting, numbers rackets, and underground casinos. Gagliano ensured that these operations were meticulously organized, with trusted associates managing day-to-day activities while revenues were funneled upward in a controlled manner. High-stakes gambling provided enormous profits, yet Gagliano emphasized discretion to avoid law enforcement scrutiny. Unlike other crime families whose gambling networks were notorious and high-profile, Gagliano's systems were quiet, effective, and almost invisible to public attention, generating consistent revenue for the family over decades. In addition to gambling, labor racketeering became a cornerstone of the Lucchese family's expansion. Gagliano recognized the immense value of unions and their ability to influence construction, shipping, and manufacturing sectors. By strategically placing loyal operatives in key union positions, the family could manipulate contracts, control hiring, and extract payments from businesses seeking labor peace. This approach combined financial profit with influence, as controlling unions also allowed the family to extend its reach into legitimate industries. Gagliano's approach was subtle. He preferred negotiation, influence, and strategic leverage over violent enforcement, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of power and economics. Loan sharking was another critical revenue stream during this period. By offering high-interest loans to individuals and businesses who lacked access to legitimate credit, the Lucchese family created a network of dependence and financial control. Borrowers were often in vulnerable positions, allowing the family to secure repayment and, in some cases, exert influence over their activities. Gagliano ensured that this practice was managed carefully, balancing enforcement with discretion. Excessive violence or coercion was avoided, both to protect the organization from law enforcement and to maintain a controlled and predictable revenue stream. Beyond direct revenue, Gagliano also focused on strategic expansion into legitimate businesses. Restaurants, nightclubs, and entertainment venues were often used as fronts for criminal operations, providing both a cover for illicit activities and an additional source of income. These enterprises allowed the Lucchese family to blend legal and illegal operations, creating layers of financial and operational security. Gagliano's understanding of business operations, combined with his strategic mindset, allowed the family to cultivate influence in legitimate sectors while maintaining control over traditional criminal enterprises. The expansion of the Lucchese family under Gagliano was not purely financial. It was also territorial and political. He carefully negotiated with other mafia families to establish boundaries, avoid unnecessary conflict, and maintain alliances. These agreements often involved profit-sharing arrangements, cooperative management of rackets, or mutual recognition of influence in key areas. By structuring these relationships strategically, Gagliano avoided costly turf wars that could have destabilized the family and attracted law enforcement attention. This combination of diplomacy and operational discipline allowed the Lucchese family to expand its influence steadily while remaining relatively secure. Gagliano also emphasized organizational structure and internal efficiency during this period. The family was hierarchically organized, with capos, lieutenants, and soldiers each responsible for specific operations and territories. Reporting lines were clear, accountability was enforced, and discretion was expected at all levels. This disciplined structure ensured that expansion did not compromise cohesion, allowing the family to grow without internal chaos. By creating a robust operational framework, Gagliano ensured that the Lucchese family could handle the increasing complexity of its enterprises while maintaining control and security. A key aspect of this expansion was the careful integration of new members and allies. Recruitment was selective, emphasizing loyalty, competence, and discretion. New associates were often tested in smaller operations before being entrusted with critical responsibilities. By cultivating a culture of loyalty and professionalism, Gagliano strengthened the family's internal cohesion and ensured that expansion did not introduce vulnerabilities or disloyalty. This careful vetting process was a cornerstone of his strategic approach, allowing the family to grow without compromising stability. The family's influence extended beyond revenue and territory to political and community connections. Gagliano understood that influence in the underworld often required indirect power in local politics, unions, and businesses. By cultivating relationships with key community leaders and officials, the family gained protection, early warnings of investigations, and leverage in negotiations. These connections also provided opportunities for strategic partnerships and financial gain, further embedding the family in both criminal and legitimate spheres. Gagliano's ability to operate across these networks of influence reflected a deep understanding of power dynamics and social strategy. By the early 1950s, the Lucchese family and Gagliano had become one of the most disciplined, profitable, and strategically positioned crime families in New York City. Its expansion was not characterized by reckless violence or flashy display, but by careful planning, strategic alliances, and operational efficiency. Each revenue stream, alliance, and territorial arrangement reflected Gagliano's philosophy: maximize profit, minimize risk, and prioritize long-term stability over short-term gain. This methodical approach ensured that the Lucchese family remained resilient, adaptable, and influential in a highly competitive criminal environment. Gagliano's strategic expansion laid the groundwork for future leaders, particularly Tommy Lucchese, who would inherit a family that was both financially robust and operationally sophisticated. By integrating criminal enterprises, legitimate businesses, and alliances with external actors, Gagliano created a durable structure capable of weathering challenges from rivals, law enforcement, and internal tensions. His vision of growth, through discretion, diplomacy, and disciplined management, became the blueprint for the Lucchese family's continued success in the decades that followed. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's expansion and consolidation of the Lucchese crime family illustrate his exceptional strategic vision, operational discipline, and long-term planning. From gambling and labor racketeering to loan sharking, legitimate business, and political influence, every aspect of growth was carefully orchestrated. By prioritizing discretion, alliances, and internal cohesion, Gagliano ensured that the family could grow without jeopardizing its stability, securing a legacy that would endure well beyond his lifetime. Under Tommy Gagliano's leadership, the Lucchese crime family became a sophisticated and highly organized enterprise engaging in a wide range of criminal operations that were carefully structured to maximize profit while minimizing exposure. Gagliano understood that true power in the underworld was not measured solely by violence but by the ability to control, influence, and extract revenue from multiple sectors simultaneously. The family's operations spanned gambling, labor rackets, loan sharking, extortion, and legitimate businesses, creating a network of interdependent enterprises that ensured financial stability and operational control. One of the cornerstone operations was the family's gambling networks, which extended across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and beyond. Numbers games, high-stakes betting, and underground casinos provided steady income while remaining discreet and strategically insulated from law enforcement attention. Gagliano ensured that these operations were carefully managed, with trusted lieutenants overseeing collections, enforcement, and distribution. The systems were designed to avoid detection, with layers of intermediaries and controlled communication channels. Unlike other families whose gambling ventures drew public scrutiny, the Lucchese family's networks were efficient, profitable, and largely invisible to outsiders, a testament to Gagliano's strategic foresight. Labor racketeering represented another major area of influence. Gagliano recognized the immense value of controlling unions and labor organizations, particularly in construction, shipping, and transportation sectors. By placing loyal operatives in key union positions, the Lucchese family could manipulate contracts, dictate hiring practices, and extract payments from businesses seeking labor peace. These arrangements provided financial gain while also granting leverage over major industries. Gagliano's approach combined subtle influence with strategic intimidation, ensuring compliance without resorting to unnecessary violence. This ability to leverage labor not only expanded revenue streams but also enhanced the family's power and credibility in both legal and illegal spheres. Loan sharking was another significant enterprise under Gagliano's oversight. The practice involved offering high-interest loans to individuals and small businesses who lacked access to legitimate credit. While these loans generated enormous profit, Gagliano ensured that enforcement was disciplined and discreet. Borrowers were carefully vetted, and repayment methods were structured to maintain compliance without provoking public attention. Loan sharking allowed the family to expand its influence over financial networks and create dependencies that reinforced loyalty and control. By balancing profit with strategic oversight, Gagliano maintained both operational efficiency and organizational security. Extortion and protection rackets also played a critical role in the family's operation. Businesses, particularly small enterprises, were approached with offers of protection that ensured safety from interference or sabotage. In practice, these arrangements guaranteed steady payments to the family while simultaneously asserting its influence over local commerce. Gagliano's methodical approach to extortion emphasized discretion, predictability, and reliability. Threats were carefully calculated, ensuring compliance while minimizing the risk of attracting law enforcement scrutiny. By maintaining order and avoiding unnecessary brutality, Gagliano strengthened both the family's reputation and its long-term stability. Strategic alliances with other mafia families were essential to the success of these operations. Gagliano negotiated agreements to avoid conflicts over territories, rackets, and high-value contracts. These arrangements often included profit-sharing agreements or cooperative management of certain enterprises. By formalizing these alliances quietly, Gagliano minimized the risk of open conflict and ensured that operations could continue smoothly. This diplomatic skill allowed the Lachise family to operate efficiently in competitive environments while maintaining the benefits of shared resources and mutual support. Gagliano also focused on high-profile deals and investments that blended criminal operations with legitimate business ventures. Restaurants, nightclubs, construction companies, and entertainment venues often serve as fronts for money laundering, revenue generation, and influence building. These legitimate enterprises provided a veneer of respectability while allowing the family to integrate its criminal activities into broader economic networks. The dual use of legitimate and illicit enterprises demonstrated Gagliano's sophisticated understanding of both business and power, enabling the family to expand influence without exposing itself to unnecessary risk. Key to the success of these operations was Gagliano's hierarchical and disciplined organizational structure. Capos, lieutenants, and soldiers were assigned specific responsibilities, with clear reporting lines and accountability measures. This structure ensured that all operations, whether gambling, loan sharking, labor control, or extortion, were coordinated efficiently and consistently. Delegation of authority allowed Gagliano to maintain strategic oversight without becoming entangled in daily operations, while subordinates understood their roles and the consequences of failure or disloyalty. This combination of delegation and accountability created a resilient and efficient organization capable of managing complex operations across multiple sectors. Information management was another critical component. Gagliano recognized that intelligence about rival families, law enforcement activity, and business opportunities was as valuable as any revenue stream. Trusted lieutenants collected information discreetly, communicated updates securely, and advised on potential threats or opportunities. This culture of intelligence gathering allowed the family to anticipate challenges, exploit opportunities, and maintain operational advantages. Gagliano's emphasis on information and discretion ensured that the family could act decisively when necessary, while avoiding unnecessary exposure. The family's expansion into unions, businesses, and high-value deals also strengthened its political and social influence. By cultivating relationships with community leaders, union officials, and key business figures, Gagliano created a network of indirect power. These connections provided early warnings of investigations, facilitated negotiations, and reinforced the family's reputation as a stable and reliable partner in both legal and illegal enterprises. Gagliano understood that influence extended beyond immediate criminal operations. Social, economic, and political networks were essential to the family's long-term security and growth. By the early 1950s, the Lachise family under Gagliano had achieved a level of organizational sophistication, financial security, and influence unmatched by many of its contemporaries. Its operations were diversified across gambling, labor, finance, extortion and legitimate enterprises with careful oversight, strategic alliances, and disciplined enforcement. Gagliano's combination of discretion, strategic planning, and operational control allowed the family to thrive in a competitive and often volatile environment. This integrated approach not only ensured immediate profitability, but also laid the groundwork for continued success under future leaders, like Tommy Luckey's. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's orchestration of the Luckey's family's major operations demonstrates his extraordinary strategic vision, organizational discipline, and ability to balance risk and profit. By combining careful management of gambling, labor rackets, loan sharking, extortion, legitimate businesses, and alliances with rivals, he created a durable and resilient criminal enterprise. His leadership emphasized discretion, strategic foresight, and operational efficiency, ensuring that the family could expand and maintain dominance without attracting unnecessary attention or instability. The Luckey's crime family's success under Gagliano stands as a testament to his skill as the silent architect, a man whose quiet yet deliberate leadership shaped one of the most powerful organized crime organizations in American history. Even the most disciplined and strategically managed criminal organization faces moments of crisis, and the Luckey's crime family under Tommy Gagliano was no exception. Despite the family's careful expansion, operational discipline, and alliances, unforeseen challenges arose that tested Gagliano's leadership, judgment, and capacity for strategic management. These moments, ranging from rival encroachments to internal disputes, law enforcement scrutiny, and high-stakes negotiation, provided opportunities for Gagliano to demonstrate the full extent of his skill as the silent architect. One of the most pressing challenges Gagliano faced was territorial pressure from rival families. The five families of New York were constantly jockeying for influence, control over profitable rackets, and dominance in key neighborhoods. Disputes over gambling territories, labor unions, or construction contracts had the potential to escalate into violent confrontations, which could destabilize operations and attract law enforcement attention. Gagliano approached these rivalries not through impulsive aggression but through strategic negotiation, alliance building, and careful diplomacy. By understanding the motivations and pressures on his rivals, he could broker agreements, divide territories, or arrange cooperative ventures that satisfied all parties while protecting the Luckey's family's interests. Internal disputes presented another significant challenge. Like any criminal organization, the Luckey's family was home to ambitious capo and soldiers who occasionally tested authority or pursued independent agendas. Gagliano mitigated these threats through a combination of mentorship, discipline, and strategic observation. Potential troublemakers were closely monitored, and their loyalty reinforced through careful guidance and rewards for obedience. When necessary, subtle corrective measures were applied: warnings, reassignment, or temporary suspension of privileges, always ensuring that discipline was enforced without creating unnecessary disruption or risk of exposure. This measured approach maintained cohesion and minimized internal instability. Law enforcement scrutiny was a constant and growing concern during Gagliano's reign. Federal and local authorities were increasingly focused on organized crime, using investigations, surveillance, and informants to target mafia operations. Gagliano's response was meticulous and preventative. He ensured that communications were discreet, operations were insulated and sensitive, decisions were handled by trusted lieutenants, reducing direct exposure. He also cultivated relationships with political and union figures, providing indirect protection and early warnings of potential investigations. By combining operational security, strategic alliances, and discretion, Gagliano was able to navigate law enforcement pressures without jeopardizing the family's activities or stability. A particularly delicate type of crisis involved high-profile business negotiations and union contracts. Large construction projects, lucrative contracts, and entertainment ventures often involved multiple stakeholders, including legitimate business owners, union officials, and occasionally rival criminal elements. Mismanagement of these deals could lead to financial loss, operational disruption, or reputational damage. Gagliano personally oversaw the strategic planning for these negotiations, using intelligence, influence, and subtle persuasion to secure favorable outcomes. His ability to anticipate obstacles, manage competing interests, and maintain discretion ensured that these high-stakes dealings benefited the family while minimizing risk. Crises also arose from unexpected events, such as disputes between associates, betrayal, or opportunistic attacks by rivals seeking to exploit perceived weaknesses. Gagliano's response to these situations was guided by calm assessment and strategic patience. Rather than reacting impulsively, he analyzed the situation, considered all potential outcomes, and deployed solutions that preserved authority, protected assets, and maintained operational continuity. This capacity to remain composed under pressure earned him the respect and loyalty of his subordinates while reinforcing the stability of the family in turbulent circumstances. Another recurring challenge was the management of public perception. Even a discreet organization could attract unwanted attention if conflicts escalate. Violent acts occurred publicly or the media reported on criminal activities. Gagliano understood that reputation could influence both rivals and law enforcement. By enforcing internal discipline, ensuring discretion in all operations, and controlling the narrative through indirect channels, he maintained a balance between demonstrating authority and avoiding notoriety. This careful management of perception reinforced the family's image as a stable, efficient, and disciplined organization rather than a reckless or chaotic one. Strategic use of intelligence and informants also played a key role in crisis management. Trusted lieutenants gathered information on rival movements, law enforcement investigation, and potential threats, which Gagliano analyzed to make informed decisions. This proactive approach allowed the family to anticipate challenges rather than merely react to them. Whether it involved negotiating a territorial dispute, securing a high-stakes contract, or neutralizing an internal threat, intelligent, informed decision-making became a hallmark of Gagliano's leadership, allowing him to act decisively while minimizing unnecessary risk. Economic fluctuations and changes in industry also posed challenges. The family's investments in construction, unions, and entertainment required adaptation to shifting economic conditions, business competition, and labor disputes. Gagliano applied prudent management, diversification, and contingency planning to ensure that economic pressures did not destabilize the family. By maintaining multiple revenue streams and avoiding over-reliance on any single operation, he created resilience against both financial and operational crises. Finally, high-profile arrests or legal inquiries targeting other mafia figures sometimes created indirect pressure on Gagliano and his associates. He navigated these events with strategic caution, ensuring that the family remained insulated from collateral scrutiny. By maintaining a disciplined operational model, emphasizing loyalty, and avoiding public exposure, Gagliano turned potential crises into opportunities to reinforce the family's cohesion and operational security. In all these challenges, a consistent pattern emerges. Gagliano relied on patience, strategic foresight, operational discipline, and discreet influence rather than impulsive action or public displays of force. Whether dealing with rival families, internal disputes, law enforcement, business negotiation, or unforeseen crises, his approach combined analysis, delegation, and measured intervention. This methodology allowed the Lucchese family to weather crises that might have destabilized less organized or more impulsive organizations, further solidifying Gagliano's reputation as the silent architect. By the early 1950s, these strategies had created a Lucchese crime family that was not only profitable and influential but also remarkably resilient. Crises that might have destroyed other families were resolved with minimal violence, disruption, or exposure. Gagliano's ability to navigate high-stakes challenges reinforced the stability, longevity, and power of the organization, creating a blueprint for future leaders who would continue to uphold his principles of discretion, strategy, and operational control. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's management of crisis demonstrates his extraordinary leadership under pressure. By combining intelligence, strategic alliances, operational discipline, and patient judgment, he successfully navigated the Lucchese family through rivalries, internal disputes, legal scrutiny, and economic challenges. Each high-stakes incident reinforced the family's stability and prosperity, solidifying Gagliano's legacy as a master strategist whose silent, deliberate approach ensured the enduring strength of one of New York's most formidable organized crime families. While Tommy Gagliano is often remembered as the silent architect of the Lucchese crime family, his life was shaped not only by his strategic genius in the underworld but also by his personal habits, character, and the relationships that defined him outside of organized crime. Gagliano's success was inseparable from his personality, a blend of discretion, intelligence, patience, and a calm demeanor that commanded respect without the need for ostentation or intimidation. Understanding the man behind the empire offers a fuller picture of why he was so effective as a leader, and why his influence endured long after his retirement. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Gagliano maintained a relatively private personal life, keeping a low profile and avoiding public attention. He was not given to flamboyance, flashy displays of wealth, or violent theatrics that attracted media scrutiny. This preference for privacy extended to both his home life and his public persona, allowing him to operate effectively without attracting unnecessary attention from law enforcement or rivals. By cultivating an unassuming exterior, Gagliano was able to shield both himself and the family from exposure, demonstrating the power of discretion as a leadership tool. Family played an important role in Gagliano's life. He was known to be devoted to his close relatives, prioritizing their welfare, while keeping them shielded from the criminal world. His focus on family extended beyond blood relations to the broader concept of loyalty within the Lucky's organization. Gagliano treated trusted associates and lieutenants as extensions of his own household, fostering a sense of loyalty, mutual respect, and accountability. This approach created a culture within the family that emphasized trust, cohesion, and shared responsibility, reinforcing the stability that would define the organization for decades. Gagliano's personality was defined by patience, calmness, and calculated decision-making. He rarely reacted impulsively, even under pressure, and instead relied on careful observation, intelligence gathering, and strategic planning. This temperament allowed him to navigate complex rivalries, internal disputes, and high-stakes operations with minimal conflict and disruption. Associates admired his ability to remain composed, viewing him as a source of wisdom and steady leadership in an environment often characterized by volatility and unpredictability. Despite his discreet public persona, Gagliano had a keen intellect and strategic mind. He approached the underworld not merely as a series of criminal enterprises but as a complex system of relationships, opportunities, and risks that required careful management. He understood that alliances, influence, and reputation were as important as revenue streams and enforcement. This intellectual approach allowed him to anticipate challenges, negotiate effectively, and structure the family in a way that maximized stability and longevity. Gagliano's strategic thinking was a defining feature of his leadership, distinguishing him from more impulsive or violent contemporaries. Gagliano was also known for his discipline and operational focus. He maintained strict standards for behavior, accountability, and performance among his associates. Soldiers and lieutenants were expected to carry out their responsibility reliably, exercise discretion, and respect the chain of command. Gagliano's own life reflected these values. He adhered to careful routine, maintained clear priorities, and avoided unnecessary distractions. This personal discipline set an example for the family, reinforcing a culture of efficiency, reliability, and respect for the organizational structure. A defining trait of Gagliano's character was his quiet authority. He did not rely on intimidation, threats, or displays of force to command loyalty. Instead, his calm demeanor, consistent decision-making, and strategic insight inspired respect and compliance. Associate understood that Gagliano's approval was earned through competence, discretion, and loyalty, rather than through fear or coercion. This approach created a sense of mutual respect and reinforced cohesion within the family, making it possible to manage a large and complex criminal organization with minimal internal conflict. Gagliano's personal habits reflected his broader philosophy of discretion and control. He avoided excessive indulgence or behavior that could draw unwanted attention. While he enjoyed the occasional social or community gathering, he remained largely private and cautious, keeping his personal life separate from his criminal operation. This careful separation not only protected him and his family but also ensured that he could operate with clarity, focus, and strategic foresight. His lifestyle mirrored his leadership style, controlled, deliberate, and calculated for long-term stability. Despite the demands of running one of New York's most influential crime families, Gagliano maintained a sense of moral code within his own framework. He valued loyalty, reliability, and discretion above all else, and he expected these values from his associates. Betrayal, incompetence, or impulsive behavior was met with decisive but measured action. Gagliano's understanding of justice within the organization was practical rather than emotional. It was designed to preserve the family's stability and operational efficiency, rather than to satisfy personal vengeance or ego. Gagliano also cultivated a network of respect outside the criminal world, maintaining relationships with business owners, union leaders, and political figures. These connections were not merely transactional. They reflected his understanding of influence, reputation, and social strategy. Gagliano was able to navigate complex networks of power and influence with subtlety, using relationships to protect the family, secure opportunities, and mitigate risks. This ability to operate effectively in both legal and illicit spheres demonstrates his exceptional social intelligence and strategic acumen. In personal interactions, Gagliano was known for his measured speech and thoughtful demeanor. He did not speak unnecessarily, preferring to listen, observe, and assess situations before making decisions. This habit reinforced his reputation as the silent architect, creating an aura of intelligence, authority, and unpredictability that deterred challenges. Associates and rivals alike understood that Gagliano's silence was not weakness but a calculated tactic, and that his words when spoken carried weight and consequence. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's personal life and character were inseparable from his success. as the leader of the Lucchese crime family. His discretion, patience, intellect, discipline, loyalty, and strategic foresight defined both the man and the organization he built. By maintaining a private life, cultivating relationships, and operating with calm authority, he was able to manage complex criminal enterprises while minimizing risk and ensuring long-term stability. The silent architect's personal habits, values, and demeanor not only shaped his own leadership but also left an enduring mark on the culture, efficiency, and resilience of the Lucchese family. Gagliano's ability to balance personal discretion with professional authority, to combine strategic thinking with loyalty and mentorship, and to maintain operational control without attracting attention, stands as a testament to his extraordinary skill, character, and foresight. In understanding the man behind the empire, we gain insight into the principles, habits, and temperament that allow one of New York's most powerful crime families to flourish under his leadership and endure long after his time. One of Tommy Gagliano's most defining traits as the silent architect of the Lucchese crime family was his extraordinary ability to maintain discretion and evade the constant scrutiny of law enforcement. In an era when organized crime was increasingly targeted by federal authorities, Gagliano's genius lay in his understanding that visibility was dangerous, and that operational success depended as much on secrecy, careful planning, and intelligence gathering as it did on revenue and influence. His strategies for avoiding attention were methodical, deliberate, and embedded into every aspect of the family's operation. Central to Gagliano's approach was his insistence on operational compartmentalization. No single individual except for a trusted few lieutenants knew the full scope of the family's operation. Soldiers and capos were assigned specific tasks, such as overseeing gambling rings, loan sharking, or union influence, without being exposed to the broader strategy or other revenue streams. This compartmentalization minimized the risk that the arrest or betrayal of one operative could compromise the entire organization. By restricting knowledge to those who absolutely needed it, Gagliano ensured that the family's secrets remained secure. Communication was another critical element of discretion. Gagliano implemented layers of intermediaries and secure channels to transmit instructions, avoiding direct contact whenever possible. Messages were often passed verbally through trusted associates or via code language, reducing the likelihood of interception by law enforcement. Even within the family, he emphasized caution in discussions about operations, teaching subordinates to speak carefully, avoid incriminating statements, and never boast about successes. This culture of verbal discipline was essential in protecting the family from surveillance, wiretaps, and informants. Gagliano also exercised extreme caution in his personal movements and visibility. Unlike other bosses who flaunted wealth or power, he maintained a low profile, traveling discreetly and avoiding public attention. Social appearances were carefully managed, and his personal habits reflected a commitment to privacy. By keeping a calm, unassuming presence, he avoided the scrutiny that often ensnared more conspicuous leaders. Gagliano understood that the less he was seen, the less vulnerable he became, and he embedded this principle into the culture of the family. The use of trusted lieutenants and capos was central to this strategy. Gagliano surrounded himself with intelligent, loyal, and discreet subordinates who could execute operations independently while protecting him from exposure. These lieutenants were carefully vetted, tested for loyalty, and educated in the principles of discretion. They were empowered to manage day-to-day operations, handle disputes, and enforce rules without the need for direct intervention from the boss. By delegating authority to highly reliable individuals, Gagliano insulated himself from risk while maintaining control over the family's overall strategy. Intelligence gathering was another hallmark of Gagliano's leadership. He maintained networks of informants, trusted contacts, and allies both within and outside the criminal world, allowing him to anticipate threats, monitor law enforcement activity, and remain aware of potential challenges. These networks provided early warning of investigations, rival maneuvers, or suspicious behavior within the family. Gagliano's ability to process and act upon this intelligence discreetly ensured that the Lucchese family could operate safely, avoiding legal entanglements and preempting crises before they escalated. Gagliano's approach to law enforcement was also proactive. He understood that evasion required more than secrecy. It demanded strategic planning, patience, and risk assessment. Key operations were structured to minimize exposure. Financial transactions were managed carefully to avoid detection, and potential vulnerabilities were constantly reassessed. The family avoided unnecessary violence that could draw attention, and conflicts with rivals were often resolved through negotiation rather than public confrontation. This disciplined approach reduced risk, and allowed the family to maintain dominance without provoking excessive scrutiny. Financial operations were conducted with equal caution. Gagliano emphasized legal and quasi-legal methods to protect wealth, using legitimate businesses, bank accounts, and layered investments to obscure the source of income. Money laundering was handled discreetly, ensuring that profits from gambling, extortion, and loan sharking were shielded from investigation. These financial strategies were integrated into the broader framework of operational discretion, reflecting Gagliano's understanding that long-term success required both operational security and fiscal intelligence. Another crucial element of discretion was relationship management. Gagliano maintained alliances with other mafia families, business leaders, and union officials, creating a network of mutual benefit and protection. These alliances often served as buffers against law enforcement, as well as channels for resolving disputes quietly. By cultivating loyalty and trust among key contacts, Gagliano created a protected ecosystem in which the Lucchese family could operate with relative impunity. The careful balance of power, influence, and discretion became a defining characteristic of his leadership. Perhaps most importantly, Gagliano's personal style reinforced the family's overall culture of discretion. He led by example, demonstrating patience, calmness, and strategic silence in every aspect of life. Associates learned that success depended not on aggression or visibility, but on careful planning, loyalty, and operational intelligence. Gagliano's ability to inspire respect without intimidation, to maintain authority without visibility, and to execute complex operations without attracting attention became the foundation for the family's longevity and success. The effectiveness of these strategies is evident in the family's history. During Gagliano's tenure, the Lucchese family expanded operations, increased influence, and maintained profitability while avoiding major law enforcement entanglements or public scandals. Where other families faced arrests, indictments, or internal collapses, Gagliano's organization thrived quietly, protected by a culture of discretion, intelligence, and strategic foresight. The combination of operational compartmentalization, secure communication, trusted lieutenants, and careful alliance created a resilient system capable of withstanding the pressures of law enforcement and rival families alike. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's mastery of discretion was one of his most powerful tools as a leader. By emphasizing operational secrecy, disciplined communication, strategic intelligence, financial prudence, and careful alliance, he ensured that the Lucchese family could grow, prosper, and maintain influence without attracting undue attention. His leadership demonstrates that in organized crime, power is not solely derived from violence or reputation, it is also rooted in strategy, intelligence, patience, and the ability to remain unseen while controlling every aspect of the organization. Gagliano's legacy as the silent architect is inseparable from this mastery of discretion, which allowed him to build one of New York's most enduring and influential crime families. Tommy Gagliano's leadership extended far beyond the management of day-to-day operations and the careful expansion of the Lucchese crime family. One of his most critical contributions to the organization was his focus on succession and the grooming of future leaders, particularly Tommy Lucchese, who would inherit the family and guide it to unprecedented levels of influence and prosperity. Gagliano understood that the stability and long-term success of the family depended on preparing a successor capable of maintaining discipline, expanding operations, and navigating the increasingly complex underworld of New York City. The process of mentorship under Gagliano was deliberate and strategic. Lucchese was not simply placed in positions of authority. He was gradually exposed to the full spectrum of the family's operations, including gambling, labor rackets, loan sharking, extortion, and legitimate business dealings. Gagliano recognized the importance of hands-on experience, allowing Lucchese to learn through observation, participation, and responsibility. By understanding both the operational details and the broader strategic context, Lucchese gained the skills necessary to make sound decisions while preserving the family's stability and discretion. Central to this mentorship was the cultivation of leadership qualities. Gagliano emphasized patience, discretion, loyalty, and intelligence as the cornerstones of effective leadership. Lucchese was taught that public visibility and aggressive displays of power could jeopardize the family, that influence was often more effectively wielded through subtlety, negotiation, and strategic alliances. Gagliano's approach instilled in Lucchese the understanding that leadership in organized crime was as much about managing relationships, both within the family and externally, as it was about revenue generation or enforcement. A critical aspect of Lucchese's training involved decision-making under pressure. Gagliano created controlled situations in which his protégé had to assess risks, weigh options, and make strategic choices, whether negotiating with rival families, mediating internal disputes, or handling complex financial arrangements. Lucchese was encouraged to think several steps ahead and anticipate the consequences of every action. This practical experience cultivated not only operational competence but also the foresight necessary to navigate the unpredictable and high-stakes environment of organized crime. Gagliano also focused on instilling a sense of loyalty and discipline. The success of the Lucchese family depended on a cohesive, reliable organization in which members followed orders and respected the chain of command. Lucchese was trained to lead with authority tempered by fairness and strategic intelligence. He observed firsthand how Gagliano managed conflicts, reinforced loyalty, and addressed betrayal, learning the importance of balancing firmness with discretion. This foundation would enable him to command respect without resorting to unnecessary violence or intimidation, a hallmark of his later leadership style. Another critical component of mentorship was network building and alliance management. Gagliano demonstrated to Lucchese the value of cultivating relationships with other crime families, business leaders, union officials, and political figures. Lucchese learned that influence often extended beyond immediate operations and that the ability to negotiate, compromise, and leverage alliances was essential to long-term success. By participating in high-level negotiations and observing Gagliano's diplomacy, Lucchese gained the social intelligence and strategic awareness required to navigate complex networks of power and authority. Gagliano's mentorship was not limited to operational or strategic guidance. It also involved ethical and cultural instruction within the organization. Lucchese was taught the unwritten rules of loyalty, discretion, and respect that governed interactions within the family. He learned that discipline, accountability, and the careful enforcement of consequence for betrayal or incompetence were essential to maintaining cohesion. By embedding these values early, Gagliano ensured that Lucchese would inherit not just a profitable organization but a disciplined, resilient, and loyal one capable of enduring challenges over time. The gradual transfer of authority was another hallmark of Gagliano's succession planning. Lucchese was increasingly entrusted with responsibility for operations, decision-making, and negotiation. This incremental empowerment allowed him to gain practical experience while demonstrating his competence to the rest of the family. Gagliano remained a guiding presence, providing advice and oversight without micromanaging, allowing Lucchese to develop confidence, authority, and respect from subordinates. This method ensured a seamless transition of leadership that minimized internal disruption or rival opportunism. Throughout this mentorship, Gagliano emphasized the importance of discretion and invisibility. Lucchese learned that maintaining a low profile, avoiding unnecessary attention, executing operations quietly were as crucial as financial or territorial success. He observed how Gagliano conducted the family's affairs with subtlety, relying on intelligence, communication, and influence rather than public displays of force. These lessons in discretion would define Lucchese's tenure as leader, allowing him to expand the family's power while avoiding the pitfalls that ensnared less cautious predecessors. By the time Gagliano stepped back from active leadership, Lucchese had become fully capable of assuming control. He had mastered the operational, strategic, and interpersonal skills necessary to lead one of New York's most complex criminal organizations. The seamless transition ensured that the family retained its stability, profitability, and influence, even as the criminal landscape evolved. Gagliano's foresight and careful mentorship allowed Lucchese not only to maintain the family's power but also to expand it to new heights, establishing the foundation for a golden era under his leadership. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's mentorship of Tommy Lucchese exemplifies the strategic foresight, patience, and intelligence that defined his leadership. By gradually exposing Lucchese to all aspects of the organization, instilling values of discretion and loyalty, cultivating decision-making skills, and demonstrating the importance of alliances and influence, Gagliano ensured that the family would endure beyond his tenure. This careful grooming of the next generation illustrates the true genius of the silent architect, the ability to build not only an empire but a legacy, ensuring that the Lucchese crime family would continue to thrive under capable leadership for decades to come. Gagliano's approach to mentorship demonstrates that success in organized crime was not only about power, violence, or revenue, it was also about vision, planning, and the cultivation of capable successors. By preparing Lucchese to inherit the family with full competence, authority, and loyalty, he secured the longevity and prosperity of the organization, leaving a lasting mark on the history of organized crime in New York City. Under Tommy Gagliano's leadership, the Lucchese crime family became a formidable presence in New York City, exercising influence that extended far beyond criminal operations into politics, labor, and legitimate business. By the 1950s, Gagliano had not only consolidated the family's power within the underworld but had also embedded its presence into key sectors of the city's economy, creating a network of control that blended legal and illegal spheres. This chapter explores how the family's influence spread across multiple arenas, and how Gagliano's strategic vision ensured dominance with minimal exposure. One of the most significant avenues of influence was the family's control over labor unions, particularly in construction, shipping, and transportation. Gagliano recognized early on that unions were more than revenue-generating mechanisms. They were powerful tools for shaping economic activity and exerting social influence. By placing loyal associates in key union positions, the Lucchese family could dictate hiring practices, influence contract negotiations, and ensure compliance with their interests. This control allowed the family not only to generate profits but also to shape the flow of labor in critical industries, giving them leverage over businesses, contractors, and rival families alike. The family's influence in unions also enabled strategic partnerships with legitimate businesses. Construction firms, shipping companies, and entertainment venues often relied on union cooperation to operate efficiently. By leveraging their control over labor, the Lucchese family could secure favorable contracts, collect fees, and maintain dominance in critical economic sectors. These arrangements were carefully managed to appear legitimate, with operations blending seamlessly with lawful business practices. Gagliano's insight was that the perception of legitimacy could shield the family from scrutiny while still delivering substantial profits and operational control. Political influence was another critical dimension of Gagliano's strategy. Through alliances with local officials, city administrators, and political figures, the family gained protection, early warnings of law enforcement activity, and opportunities to shape policy indirectly. Politicians often relied on the family to maintain labor peace, facilitate construction projects, or ensure stability in certain neighborhoods. In return, the family enjoyed a degree of immunity from interference and enjoyed access to insider knowledge that could be used to preempt challenges. Gagliano's subtle use of political leverage demonstrates his understanding that influence extended beyond force. It required diplomacy, negotiation, and carefully cultivated relationships. The family's involvement in legitimate businesses expanded during this period as well. Restaurants, nightclubs, construction companies, and entertainment venues were not only profitable but also served as fronts for laundering money and exerting social influence. Gagliano strategically positioned loyal operators in these enterprises, ensuring that financial gains and operational control flowed back into the family. These businesses also provided venues for meetings, negotiations, and the coordination of large criminal operations under the guise of legality. By embedding the family within New York's economic fabric, Gagliano ensured a degree of stability, legitimacy, and insulation from law enforcement scrutiny. Gambling operations remained a cornerstone of the family's power. Under Gagliano's careful management, gambling rings including numbers games, underground casinos, and betting networks were highly profitable yet discreetly managed. These operations were insulated from law enforcement through compartmentalization, intermediaries, and strict operational discipline. The revenues generated from gambling not only funded the family's activities but also reinforced its influence over key neighborhoods, businesses, and political allies. Gagliano understood that sustained success required quiet, consistent revenue rather than flashy or volatile operation. Another dimension of influence was the family's control over loan sharking and financial dependence. By offering high-interest loans to individuals and businesses lacking access to traditional credit, the family created networks of financial dependence that translated into loyalty and leverage. Borrowers often became indirectly tied to the family, reinforcing their influence across economic and social spheres. Gagliano's approach to lending was cautious and strategic, balancing profit with discretion and ensuring that borrowers were compliant without attracting law enforcement attention. Crucially, all of these forms of influence were interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Union control facilitated political leverage, which in turn reinforced business opportunities and revenue streams. Gambling operations generated capital that could be reinvested in legitimate businesses and high-stakes deals. Loan sharking created dependencies that strengthened loyalty and social influence. Gagliano's genius was in recognizing the interdependence of these sectors and orchestrating them in a manner that maximized overall power while minimizing exposure. Discretion and intelligence continued to be essential. Gagliano's leadership ensured that the family operated quietly, avoiding public disputes, violent spectacles, or media attention. Even as their influence expanded, the family maintained a reputation for stability and professionalism. Rival families and political figures alike understood that the Lucchese organization was formidable, capable of enforcing its interests, yet cautious enough to avoid unnecessary conflict. This combination of influence, discretion, and strategic foresight allowed the family to operate effectively in multiple arenas simultaneously. The family's influence was also evident in its ability to shape community dynamics. By maintaining relationships with local leaders, business owners, and community figures, the Lucchese family could influence neighborhood stability, labor peace, and local economic activity. This indirect control further reinforced their authority and reputation, ensuring that the family's interests were respected and protected without the need for overt displays of force. Gagliano's approach demonstrated that true power often lay in subtle influence rather than overt intimidation. By the late 1950s, the Lucchese family had achieved a level of influence that few other criminal organizations could rival. Under Gagliano's guidance, it was no longer simply a criminal enterprise, it was a network of integrated power spanning unions, politics, business, finance, and social influence. This multidimensional approach ensured that the family's operations were resilient, diversified, and insulated against potential threats. It also set the stage for future expansion under Tommy Lucchese, who inherited a disciplined, profitable, and strategically positioned organization. In summary, Tommy Gagliano's strategic vision transformed the Lucchese crime family from a traditional criminal enterprise into a powerful and influential institution within New York City. Through control over unions, political alliances, legitimate businesses, gambling operations, and financial networks, Gagliano created a web of influence that was both profitable and resilient. His ability to operate discreetly, manage relationships, and orchestrate complex operations ensured that the family's authority extended across multiple spheres, cementing its position as one of the most formidable organizations in the city. Gagliano's legacy in the 1950s demonstrates that true power in organized crime is multidimensional, rooted in strategy, intelligence, and influence rather than mere violence. By embedding the Lucchese family into the economic, political, and social fabric of New York, he ensured long-term stability, profitability, and dominance, a testament to his enduring skill as the silent architect. As the 1950s progressed, Tommy Gagliano began to focus on the future of the Lucchese crime family and the careful transition of leadership. Having built one of New York's most disciplined, profitable, and strategically positioned criminal organizations, he understood that the family's continued success depended on a smooth and deliberate transfer of authority. Unlike leaders whose exit precipitated chaos, Gagliano approached his later years with the same strategic foresight, patience, and discretion that had characterized his tenure from the very beginning. Gagliano's retirement was not abrupt. It was gradual and calculated, designed to ensure continuity, stability, and loyalty. He reduced his involvement in day-to-day operations while maintaining oversight through trusted lieutenants and advisors. During this period, he focused on mentoring Tommy Lucchese, preparing him to inherit the family in a manner that would preserve both profitability and influence. This careful handover was emblematic of Gagliano's leadership style, thoughtful, strategic, and disciplined. He recognized that the success of the family in the post-Gagliano era depended not on sudden power grabs but on deliberate planning, training, and the cultivation of trust. Even in retirement, Gagliano retained considerable influence and authority, ensuring that key decisions were aligned with the family's long-term interests. He acted as an advisor and overseer, guiding Lucchese through complex negotiations, delicate disputes, and high-stakes opportunities. By maintaining a discreet but authoritative presence, Gagliano reinforced loyalty among the family's members and ensured that internal cohesion remained intact. His ability to step back from active management while still influencing outcomes demonstrates his mastery of delegation, discretion, and strategic leadership. During this transitional period, Gagliano remained extremely cautious and private, consistent with his lifelong approach to leadership. He avoided public appearances and unnecessary interactions that could draw attention, maintaining the safety and security of both himself and the family. This low profile allowed Lucchese to assert authority without interference, gradually assuming full operational control, while Gagliano's presence served as a stabilizing force behind the scenes. The balance of visibility and invisibility was a hallmark of Gagliano's approach, allowing the family to flourish while avoiding law enforcement scrutiny and public scrutiny. The strategic delegation of authority was key to the family's stability. Gagliano had long built a hierarchical structure with clear lines of responsibility, allowing trusted capos and lieutenants to manage operations autonomously. In his later years, these leaders continued to oversee gambling, loan sharking, labor rackets, and legitimate business enterprises with minimal direct intervention. Gagliano's emphasis on operational compartmentalization and disciplined reporting ensured that the family remained efficient, resilient, and profitable, even as day-to-day decisions were increasingly handled by Lucchese and other trusted figures. A significant aspect of the transition was the reinforcement of the family's culture of loyalty and discipline. Gagliano personally oversaw the vetting and promotion of key personnel, ensuring that the leadership team shared his values and understood the importance of discretion, accountability, and strategic thinking. By embedding these principles into the family's culture, He guaranteed that the organization would continue to operate smoothly, even as leadership shifted. This focus on continuity prevented power struggles, internal conflicts, or opportunistic challenges from destabilizing the family during the sensitive transition period. Gagliano also ensured that the family's external alliances remained secure. Relationships with rival crime families, union officials, business leaders, and political contacts were carefully maintained to prevent instability or encroachment. Lachise learned the art of diplomacy and negotiation under Gagliano's guidance, observing how to balance assertiveness with subtlety and leverage influence without attracting unnecessary attention. These lessons in alliance management were crucial to preserving the family's dominance and credibility, reinforcing the principle that power depended on both internal cohesion and strategic external relationships. Financial stability was another priority during Gagliano's later years. He supervised the careful management of revenue streams, investments, and legitimate business operations to ensure that the family's economic foundation remained strong. This involved monitoring gambling networks, loan sharking operations, union-controlled enterprise, and high-value contracts, ensuring that profits were secure and reinvested strategically. By maintaining oversight without micromanaging, Gagliano allowed Lachise to develop financial acumen while ensuring that critical assets and operational integrity were protected. The retirement of a leader in organized crime often invites challenges from rivals or ambitious subordinates. Yet Gagliano's calculated approach prevented destabilization by gradually empowering Lachise, reinforcing loyalty, and maintaining a stabilizing influence. Behind the scenes, he eliminated opportunities for disputes or opportunistic takeovers. The result was a seamless transition in which the Lachise family retained its cohesion, profitability, and influence, setting the stage for a new era of expansion under Lachise's leadership. Even in his later years, Gagliano's strategic foresight extended to succession planning beyond Lachise. He emphasized the importance of cultivating a disciplined, loyal, and capable leadership team that could sustain the family for decades. By institutionalizing operational standards, reinforcing principles of discretion and loyalty, and mentoring the next generation of leaders, Gagliano ensured that the family's stability would not be tied solely to one individual. This long-term planning exemplifies his understanding of organized crime not as a fleeting enterprise, but as a legacy requiring careful stewardship. By the time of his retirement, Tommy Gagliano had transformed the Lachise crime family into one of the most disciplined, profitable, and influential organizations in New York City. Under his leadership, the family had expanded into unions, legitimate businesses, gambling, loan sharking, and political influence, all while maintaining discretion, operational efficiency, and loyalty. The seamless transition of power to Tommy Lachise ensured that the family could continue to thrive without interruption, preserving the structures, strategies, and culture that Gagliano had meticulously built over decades. In summary, Gagliano's later years reflect the culmination of his strategic vision, patience, and foresight. By carefully preparing the family for a leadership transition, mentoring Lachise, reinforcing loyalty, and safeguarding both internal and external alliances, he ensured that the Lachise crime family remained stable, profitable, and influential. His retirement was not an end but a carefully orchestrated continuation of his legacy, a testament to his understanding that true leadership in organized crime involves not only managing operations but also ensuring the long-term survival and dominance of the organization. Tommy Gagliano's ability to step back without losing influence, to empower a capable successor, and to maintain cohesion across complex operations demonstrates why he is remembered as the silent architect. His later years, marked by careful retirement planning, mentorship, and strategic oversight, cemented a legacy of stability, discretion, and enduring power that would define the Lachise crime family for decades to come. Tommy Gagliano's life and leadership left an indelible mark on organized crime in New York City, earning him the enduring title of the silent architect of the Lachise crime family. By the time of his retirement and eventual passing, Gagliano had transformed a small, relatively obscure criminal group into one of the city's most disciplined, profitable, and influential organizations. His legacy is defined not by violence or notoriety but by strategic vision, operational discipline, and the ability to build a resilient organization capable of enduring beyond his own tenure. Central to Gagliano's legacy was his commitment to discretion and strategic foresight. Unlike many contemporary crime bosses, he avoided unnecessary violence, public display of power, or flamboyant lifestyle choices that could attract attention. This quiet approach allowed him to operate efficiently, expand the family's influence, and minimize legal exposure. Gagliano's principle of remaining unseen while controlling the levers of power became a model for future leaders, demonstrating that influence in organized crime is as much about strategy and subtlety as it is about force. The operational framework Gagliano established became a blueprint for the Lachise family's continued success. He emphasized compartmentalization, delegation, and loyalty, ensuring that every member understood their role and responsibilities within the organization. Soldiers, capos, and lieutenants were entrusted with specific operations, but only a select few had full knowledge of the family's structure and strategies. This approach reduced vulnerabilities, protected key leaders, and created a culture of accountability and discipline. By institutionalizing these principles, Gagliano laid the foundation for a resilient organization capable of surviving internal conflicts and external pressures. Gagliano's mentorship of Tommy Lachise was another defining element of his legacy. Recognizing the importance of succession, he carefully prepared Lachise to take over leadership, exposing him to every facet of the organization, from criminal operations to legitimate business ventures and labor influence. This deliberate grooming ensured that the family could transition leadership seamlessly, without disruption or power struggles, preserving stability and continuity. Lachise's later success as the head of the family is a direct reflection of Gagliano's foresight and mentorship, demonstrating the long-term impact of his leadership philosophy. The family's influence under Gagliano extended beyond traditional criminal activity, encompassing politics, labor unions, legitimate businesses, and social influence. By embedding the organization within key sectors of New York City, he created multiple revenue streams, while simultaneously building a network of alliances that reinforced the family's authority. These relationships not only generated profits, but also provided protection, influence, and stability, further exemplifying Gagliano's understanding that power in organized crime is multidimensional. His ability to operate simultaneously in legal and illicit spheres ensured the family's resilience and positioned it as a formidable institution in the city's social and economic fabric. Gagliano's emphasis on intelligence and information gathering further solidified his reputation as a master strategist. He cultivated networks of trusted informants, allies, and intermediaries to monitor rival families, law enforcement activity, and potential internal threats. By anticipating challenges and acting proactively, he minimized risk and maintained control over the family's operation. This focus on intelligence demonstrated his understanding that knowledge and foresight are as crucial to power as resources or manpower, a principle that continued to guide the family long after his retirement. Another cornerstone of his legacy was the culture of loyalty and discipline that permeated the Lachise organization. Gagliano enforced strict standards for behavior, accountability, and operational performance, cultivating an environment in which respect for hierarchy and discretion were paramount. Soldiers and lieutenants were rewarded for competence and loyalty, while betrayal or recklessness was met with measured but decisive consequences. This internal cohesion allowed the family to operate efficiently and avoid the disruption that plagued other organizations, reinforcing its stability and long-term success. Gagliano's financial strategies also contributed to the enduring strength of the Lachise family. He emphasized diversification, careful management, and discreet integration of legal and illegal enterprises, ensuring that profits were secure and reinvested strategically. Gambling operations, loan sharking, and union influence were complemented by legitimate business ventures, providing both revenue and a shield against law enforcement scrutiny. This balanced approach ensured the family's economic foundation remained strong, enabling future leaders like Lachise to expand operations while minimizing risk. Despite his low profile, Gagliano commanded respect and authority among his peers, both within the Lachise family and across the five families of New York. His reputation for intelligence, patience, and strategic thinking allowed him to negotiate with rivals, resolve conflicts, and maintain alliances without resorting to excessive violence. This ability to wield influence quietly yet effectively earned him a legacy not of fear, but of respect, authority, which became a hallmark of the Lachise family under his guidance and beyond. Gagliano's approach to leadership demonstrated that longevity and stability in organized crime depended on more than aggression or intimidation. By focusing on mentorship, succession planning, operational discipline, intelligence, and strategic alliances, he created a family that could endure challenges, adapt to changing circumstances, and continue to thrive under subsequent leaders. His emphasis on quiet influence, respect, and calculated decision-making provided a framework that guided the organization for decades, shaping the future of the Lachise family long after he stepped down. In reflecting on Gagliano's legacy, it becomes clear that his contributions extended far beyond immediate financial success. He transformed the Lachise family into a resilient, influential, and strategically managed organization capable of navigating complex social, political, and economic landscapes. His focus on mentorship ensured continuity, his operational strategies ensured efficiency, and his intelligence-focused approach minimized risk and exposure. Through these efforts, he not only secured his own legacy but also laid the foundation for the family's enduring influence in New York's underworld. Ultimately, Tommy Gagliano's impact on organized crime is defined by his vision, patience, and strategic brilliance. He was not the loudest or most violent boss, but his quiet, calculated leadership allowed the Lucky's crime family to grow stronger, more disciplined, and more influential than many of its contemporaries. His methods emphasizing discretion, operational intelligence, loyalty, and strategic foresight set a standard for leadership that would influence not only his immediate successor, Tommy Lakis, but also the broader culture of organized crime in New York City. In conclusion, Tommy Gagliano's life and leadership exemplify the power of strategy, patience, and discretion in organized crime. As the silent architect, he built an empire that was profitable, influential, and enduring, successfully navigating rivalries, law enforcement pressures, and the complexities of New York City's social and economic networks. His legacy is preserved in the structure, culture, and continued prominence of the Lakis crime family, serving as a lasting testament to the idea that true power lies not in visibility or violence, but in intelligence, planning, and the ability to shape an organization from behind the scenes. The story of Tommy Gagliano reminds us that in the underworld, the most formidable leaders are often the quietest, those who build empires with foresight, enforce loyalty with subtle authority, and secure legacies that endure long after their own time. Gagliano's life and work solidify his place in history as one of the most skilled and influential architects of organized crime in America. A man whose silent hand guided the Lucchese crime family to heights of power that would define the mafia landscape for decades.